the Industrial Revolution of the Mage Lord. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction. So please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story in all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter. And if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 226 Pre-War Preparations. The Federation's 3 Battle Mage regiment stationed in Black Rock City in the Evil Moon Mountains consisted of a scouting unit, a defense unit, and a high-level mage regiment. The scouting unit was staffed with 500-man resident battle mages, while the defense unit was supplemented by a steady stream of spellcasters dispatched from the rear. The high-level mage regiment was unique, consisting of just over 100 high-level battle mages, utilizing their exceptional aerial mobility to carry out dangerous surprise attacks and counterattacks. A week later, the Federation completed its preparatory work for the assault on the demonic supply lines, dubbed Operation RIP. This operation was commanded by Scout Commander Andre Weiss, who would personally lead the 300-man scouting regiments in a stealthy advance through the gap in the Evil Moon Mountain Gorge towards Supplier Route 3, arriving at the hilly outpost camp in advance to await their orders. This was a mixed combat operation primarily involving ground forces. Using highly agile high-level mages as decoys, they frequently harassed and attacked demonic logistics routes beyond supply lines 3 through 8. The goal was to divert the attention of the demon priests and hybrid beasts in the target area, creating a gap in the enemy's defenses for the scouts' mage regiments. Though mostly low to mid-level, the scouts' battle mages, stationed year-round in the Evil Moon Mountains, had engaged in countless small-scale skirmishes with the demons across this vast, hundreds-mile-long conflict zone. They were truly elite forces, truly navigating the mortal realm. Their swarming spells had held off frenzied demonic warriors, outnumbering their own forces, and they braved the terrifying threat of enemy self-destruction. During the most difficult days of the war, when the demon army advanced to the gates of Blackstone City, they coordinated with the city's defenses, operating in small groups on the battlefield and repeatedly harassing the demon rear, effectively delaying the enemy's advance while awaiting human reinforcements. They were arguably the most combat-minded spellcasters within the Federation. Even knowing full well that the demons were sending powerful and terrifying hybrid beasts into battle, none of them flinched, afraid to participate in combat missions. Commander Damo Frankie's 100-man scout regiment had suffered over 50% casualties in a previous skirmish against the hybrid beasts, forcing them to draw on low-level spellcasters from other chapters for reinforcement. Their combat effectiveness was far inferior to that of the other 2 chapters participating in this operation. Therefore, Commander Andre Weiss not only issued the entire regiment with Lances of Oblivion, but also generously replenished them with 500 rounds of Oblivion mana ammunition, a gesture of unadulterated special care. Master Frankie, if we face the demonic hybrid beasts head-on again, we won't be defeated again. An old scout mage who had been with Frankie for a long time stroked the annihilation spear he had been given and snorted coldly. HMPH, if I encounter those demonic bastards again, I'll make sure to blow a hole through their foreheads. The hybrid beasts, created through the mystical crossbreeding of the demonic race, were clearly different from ordinary wild or mounted monsters. Not only could they unleash fireballs, ice blades, venom, and other similar offensive spells from their mouths, but their flesh and blood bodies were also incredibly tough and resistant to magic, making them almost completely immune to common low-level area of effect spells. Ordinary bloodline warriors and mage retinues could not withstand the impact of their massive bodies, and the group area of effect attacks of spellcasters had limited damage to them. This forced spellcasters to gather many people to use powerful single-target attacks to surround and kill a single hybrid beast. The berserk demon warriors, capable of cooperating with hybrid beasts, posed a formidable threat to spellcasters in this situation. Their bodies, fortified by the secret blood and flesh potion, also possessed a certain resistance to magic. In close combat, spellcasters were left with little choice but to fight to the death. The 3 scout regiments advanced at a much slower pace than the high-level mages, who could fly through the air. It took them 2 full days to reach the low mountains overlooking the demon supply lines. The scattered scout teams had already encountered demon cavalry scouts operating along the supply lines several times. Relying on the ultra-long-range attack power of their Lance of Oblivion, The scout mages were often able to detect enemy activity long in advance and, using their masterful concealment techniques, close in to attack, ensuring their own troops' movements remained undiscovered. Son of Firefall Holden and Stormwalker Matthews Willie flew side by side, expertly manipulating the surging magic power within their bodies as they soared at high speed toward a small fortress nestled amidst the dense, dark green primeval forest several miles away. It was a transit point on the demonic supply Route 10, a permanent fortress built by the demons into a fortress-like structure. It housed approximately 100 berserker warriors and several demon priests. Matthews, flying at high speed, suddenly let out a roar, drawing Fur's attention and slowing down his flight. Although Lord Gallagher allows us to freely choose our harassment targets, there is no need to choose a stronghold so far away, right? Matthews frowned and complained. We flew all the way here from the canyon outpost and stopped to replenish our magic power on the way, so that we could barely make it here. The distance is too far. If there's an emergency, I'm afraid we won't even have the strength to return. Fair, wearing a simple gray-black battle mage robe, his body hovering in the air at the top of the crown of a 100-meter-high tree. Listening to the cautious remarks of his comrade and netizen, he sneered disdainfully. What are you afraid of? It's only a day's flight. How far is it? If you can't fly anymore, we can also go back to the ground and walk. If you can't even walk, at worst, I'll suffer a little and carry you on my back. Right. He took out 2 high-level elemental magic stones from the storage ring on his finger, threw one into Matthew's arms, and began to quickly absorb the magic power contained in them to replenish himself. He kept on nagging. How long have you been stationed in the Evil Moon Mountains? Why are you still acting so timidly? If you want to lure the enemy, you have to make a big enough noise. Those fools gathered in groups of 3 or 5 near the center of the demon front line, which will inevitably attract the attention of the high-level demon priests in the central fortress. Those guys are not easy to deal with. It's easy to turn from fake bait into meat on the chopping board, Matthews said unhappily. Even so, we can quickly evacuate and return to the canyon outpost. The danger is much less than us going deep behind enemy lines. Okay, he was suddenly stunned as he spoke. You mean, if they do this, the effect of luring the enemy will not be very good? If it happens many times, it may arouse the suspicion of the demon leaders in the central fortress. They will not easily reveal the defense gaps of the supply line, and then our ground scouts will probably be severely damaged. Although Sir Wes Gallagher, a former battle mage, was the chief of the Federation and the supreme commander of the Federation's combat forces stationed in Black Rock City, his ability to control the high-level spellcasters within the chapter was extremely limited, often serving only as a nominal leader and coordinator. This was due to the complex conflicts and struggles within the Federation that had persisted within the faction since its founding a century ago. Most of the high-ranking mages in the chapters had ancestral connections to ancient families from the 7 wizarding kingdoms, or at the very least, were trusted aides or close friends of certain department heads within the Federation, a group that followed orders rather than instructions. Fair clenched his fist with one hand, crushed a magic stone in his palm that had been exhausted of magic power into powder, and said dimly, so why is this operation mainly based on the ground combat mage troops, and let the high-level spellcasters lure the enemy to assist? Humph, this group of fence-sitters who have always been hard to control will soon be eliminated by the times. Disobedient spellcasters are like tools that are not on the right hands. Now that there are more suitable substitutes, they will naturally be abandoned by the orthodox in the Federation. Matthews's expression suddenly became a little strange when he thought of this, and he silently complained in his heart, isn't this guy in front of him a typical disobedient person? How can he have the nerve to gossip about others behind their backs? Has he forgotten how he was kicked out of the Mage Regiment and retired early in disgrace? Of course, he didn't dare to say this to Fair Holden, otherwise the two of them would have to fight here before the mission was completed. Why not just tell Mr. Gallagher about the drawbacks and loopholes in our decoy plan? That would reduce ground casualties. Hell, there may be many fools, but we're not the only smart ones. Don't worry, there are other high-ranking officials who share our plan. Fell turned his gaze toward the distant supply depot and urged impatiently, all right, have you rested enough? Do you want me to make you another cup of tea? If not, let's get moving. The two quickly arrived a few hundred meters from the depot, slowing down and surveying the area. Matthews, his eyes transformed by mystical magic, immediately spotted a massive, deformed monster perched atop the small fortress. It lacked a torso, leaving only its massive head, secured in a massive iron cage. Hundreds of crimson compound eyes darted around, then almost instantly focused on the two men hovering in the sky. "It's the reconnaissance eye demon. We've been spotted," Matthews warned in a deep voice. The fortress below erupted in excitement. 4 figures clad in dark crimson robes flew out from the opening in the rooftop skylight, charging straight at Fell and Matthews. "Damn it! What's going on? Isn't this a supply station? Why are there 4 high-ranking priests?" Fell cursed. He and Matthews exchanged a quick glance, both noticing something was amiss. The leader of the 4 demon priests, also wearing the dark crimson robes signifying high rank, wore a towering metal crown, gleaming brightly in the sunlight. His head seemed to be one with a crown, its metal base embedded in the flesh, making it appear significantly larger than the other demon priests. "That's the Ascended. Damn it, that's an Ascended one among the high-ranking priests of the demon race." The 2 of them almost immediately changed direction and rushed towards the dense forest in the distance without looking back. Matthews was almost unable to speak due to the strong wind during the flight. He could only ask in a hoarse voice, "What should we do? Just run? What if they chase us closely? We can't outlast that Ascended." Fair snorted coldly. "First, keep some distance and let them catch up. After a while, we will pretend to run out of magic power and fall to the ground. Don't forget we also brought a gun of annihilation." Chapter 227, Enemy Lure Plan. For Holden and Matthews Willie flew at high speed, one in front of the other. A few hundred meters behind them, 4 demon priests followed closely. They seemed in no hurry to catch up, simply tracking their flight path, as if waiting to exhaust their magic power in this vast wilderness. Fur shouted, "Look ahead. How about an ambush there?" Matthews glanced ahead and saw a hilly, densely forested area. The vegetation was noticeably denser than elsewhere. The trees grew almost tightly together, leaving no gaps between the canopies. At first glance, it looked like an immense, dark green carpet. He nodded to Fur, and the 2 of them, in tacit understanding, hovered in midair, abruptly stopped, then plunged diagonally downward, instantly submerging themselves in the dense, primeval forest. Matthews formed a thin shell of ice to protect himself from scratches from branches during the dive. Fell, completely unconcerned, charged head first, knocking aside branches along the way and even breaking a branch as thick as a thigh. They both dashed straight down to the ground, then quickly retrieved the gun of annihilation from their storage ring and, following memory, loaded several crystal-clear bullets into the slot at the end of the gun. "Have you ever used this thing? Is it really like they say, that if it strikes a demon, it triggers a dark bloodline-like annihilation power, causing their flesh and blood to instantly wither and decay?" Fell nodded. "I've always been skeptical of what others say, but since Mr. Kilthuzad helped create this thing, it can't go wrong. And I heard, if it hits a vital spot, it can cause the opponent's body to disintegrate, shattering into dust like stone struck by a hammer. Just thinking about it makes me feel good." Matthews felt relieved and was about to ask for more details when he heard a violent gust of wind overhead. 3 demon priests, breaking through the canopy of trees, sped towards them. Fell's gun fired almost simultaneously with a black fire missile launched by the other party. Matthews instantly swung out dozens of dense ice blades, which collided with a black fire magic missile, stirring up a violent surge of magic power. A loud bang echoed in the air. Looking up again, he saw the demon priest who had unleashed the black flames had suddenly exploded from the waist, seemingly struck by an invisible hammer. His torso, severed in 2, plummeted to the ground, not a drop of blood spilling. The remaining 2 priests agilely altered their swooping flight path, hiding themselves among the thick tree trunks. They simultaneously screamed, calling for the leading Ascended one to come and assist. Their separate searches had actually separated them. Fell grinned, tucking his gun under his arm and muttering to himself, "What's going on?" I was clearly aiming for his head. He rubbed his hands together, converging into a massive chain of flames. The temperature around them instantly increased several times. Matthews, standing beside him, felt the air thinner, his mouth dry. Fell stared intently at the demon priests, who were constantly shifting positions as they charged towards him. He clasped his hands together and swung the flaming chain in his hand. As soon as the chain left his body, it transformed into a giant crimson fiery python, raising its head high and hissing. It then clung to a thick tree trunk and swept towards the enemy. Trees in the dense forest caught fire as the python passed through, sending flames and thick smoke soaring into the sky. "Are you going to burn this entire forest?" "Ahem. Even if we escape the Ascended, we won't be able to escape, Matthews cursed, choking on the smoke. Fell shrugged nonchalantly. Let's focus on the battle first. I'm a fire elemental mage, what can I do? Just earn it. Seeing the python already engulfing a demon priest, Matthews could only roll his eyes and shift his attention to the other enemy attacking from the side. He silently chanted an incantation, and a layer of crystal and ice instantly formed beneath his feet. The ice spread rapidly, forming a mirror-smooth path, carrying Matthews at lightning speed, and he instantly reached his enemy. He stretched out his hands, and a vast mass of ice crystals and snowflakes suddenly condensed within a few meters of the surrounding area. The demon priest's feet were immediately frozen as soon as they touched the ground. He was forced to release himself by wisps of black fire from his body, melting the ice and freeing himself. 3 black flame orbs appeared at his side, swirling towards Matthews standing on the ice. However, they were blocked by the continuous appearance of ice shields, eventually shattering and exploding. 3 extremely sharp ice spikes silently appeared behind the demon priest, formed from the floating ice crystals that were everywhere in the frozen area created by Matthews. With a soft hiss, the illusory shield that suddenly materialized behind the demon priest shattered, but the remaining 2 ice spikes pierced his back without hesitation, causing him to stiffen and spit out a mouthful of blood. Within the realm of a high-level ice caster, every snowflake could instantly transform into a lethal weapon. A newly promoted high-ranking priest, not much combat experience, Matthews murmured softly as he looked at the enemy lying on the ice. Turning, he saw another enemy already suffocated by the giant flaming python conjured by Fell, scorched to humanoid charcoal, instantly dead before he could even scream. A violent crackling sound echoed from the sky. It was the Ascendant approaching. The 2 men instinctively looked up, but saw no sign of the Ascendant swooping down from the sky. Be careful, Matthews, his magically enhanced eyes, was the first to notice the anomaly and shouted to Fell. A searing flame shield instantly enveloped the fire mage, tightly enveloping him. He turned sharply to find a pair of strange, twisted, dark arms clawing at his waist. He instinctively activated the flame shield's effects, only to find the strange, dark hands completely oblivious to the blazing flames, capable of melting even metal, piercing through the shield and clutching his waist. Fell groaned in pain and took 2 steps back. Suddenly, his footing slipped and he fell to the ground, finding himself lying on a smooth surface of ice, sliding backward at high speed. A massive gash ripped across his waist, staining the pristine white surface with scarlet. Damn it! This guy's ability is Demon Breaker. Be careful not to engage him in close combat, Fell cursed, clutching the wound on his side and struggling to rise. A figure clad in crimson robes and crowned with a metal crown slowly emerged from where Fell had stood. His face was unlike that of other demon priests. It was not covered with fine natural scales, but was densely engraved with many strange spells. What was even more strange was that 2 twisted, black, and deformed long arms suddenly grew out from the ribs under his arms. As he walked, he unconsciously waved them around, as if trying to grab something. Matthew slid backward rapidly with fear, and said anxiously, I have never fought with the promoted ones among the demon priests. Apart from the ability to break demons, do they have any other strange features? Fair coughed up a mouthful of blood and found that the wound on his waist could not be stopped by the body strengthened by flesh and blood. He could not help but snorted coldly, teleport, weakness. He also has the ability to attack with added weakness. I was injured by him, and the wound can't stop bleeding. He paused and whispered, don't compete with him in magic attacks. Try to use the gun of annihilation. Attacking the body may not be very effective. You have to aim at his head. Before Matthews could nod in response, the figure of the promoted one immediately flashed in the direction of sliding in front, and a pair of twisted long arms grabbed straight at him. 2 constantly rotating lightless black holes suddenly appeared in the palms. The crystal snowflakes and ice crystals in the frozen field were constantly sucked into it, and the vortex of the black hole expanded rapidly. Suddenly, a jet black wave erupted from the Ascendant's palm, sweeping across the blazing forest and instantly extinguishing all flames within a 100-meter radius. The surge of magical power swept through like a hurricane, shattering the icy domain Matthews had conjured. The smooth ice melted instantly, and the 2, unable to control their sliding direction, were immediately thrown away. Fair slammed hard into a charred tree trunk, gushing out another mouthful of blood, unable to even stand. Matthews rolled over and climbed to his feet, removing the annihilation spear from his sling. He half-crouched, holding the weapon horizontally. This was a technique that all spellcasters had been informed of when the weapon was issued, to improve the accuracy of their shots and aim. The Ascended's figure flickered and disappeared, reappearing quickly, closing in almost instantly on Matthews's position. When he finally appeared, Matthews quickly aimed for his chest and pulled the trigger. They were less than 5 meters away, but he wasn't sure he'd hit the head. A shot at the torso was the safest bet. With a soft sizzle, one of the Ascended's withered arms suddenly severed, and a thick, dark mist erupted from the fracture. This mist seemed to discriminate between friend and foe, and when it touched his normal body parts, it had a severe corrosive effect. The Ascended roared in anger, holding his remaining arm horizontally before him. He clasped his 2 normal hands together and thrust them forward, sending a massive ball of black flame hurtling towards Matthews. The distance was too close, and Matthews had no time to activate his defensive shield, and his magic power had been depleted by the recent battle. His heart sank, but he made no attempt to evade the attack. Instead, he raised the Annihilation Spear again and aimed at the Ascendant's chest, intending to destroy him along with him. But before he could pull the trigger, the Ascendant's head suddenly exploded with a bang, sending the metal crown flying and clattering against a rock below. Without the Ascendant's control, the black flame sphere instantly disintegrated before it could reach Matthew's body, exploding less than a meter in front of him. Several clusters of black flame landed on Matthews's shoulders and arms, searing his skin with scars. Ignoring the pain, he turned to look at Fell, who was not far away. Though unable to rise, he managed to stay propped up against a tree trunk, grinning at him with the Annihilation Spear raised. "How is it going? My aim is pretty good, right? A headshot," he chuckled twice, his face extremely pale, and he urged Matthews repeatedly, "Hiss. Quick. Use your ice spell to freeze my wound, I'm about to bleed out." Chapter 228, Operation Tearing. Matthews' Willie dragged his heavy body, his steps unsteady, to fair hold inside. He forced himself to raise his hand and unleashed a small puff of dense frost mist, instantly freezing the large, bloody wound on his side. "Is this what you call staying away from the frontline center and making a big noise?" After treating Fair's wound, Matthews could no longer hold on. He spread his legs and sat down against the tree trunk, catching his breath. "We almost killed 2 high-level spellcasters right here. Is that a big noise?" Fair chuckled, rarely refusing to argue. He pulled 2 small crystal glass tubes from his storage ring, shook the pale green liquid inside, and slipped one into Matthew's hand. "Drink it. These are my last 2 bottles. A magical potion concocted by the old Quinn family, made with extract from the core of the golden tree." Matthews took the glass tube with a look of surprise, holding it in his hand, reluctant to unscrew the cork. "What? The Quinn family's illegal logging of the Golden Forest is true? No wonder those high elves consider them their #1 enemy." Fell didn't bother to explain further. After downing the potion, he closed his eyes and rested for a moment. Pushing himself to his feet, he walked over to the headless body of the Ascended One, picked up the strangely shaped metal crown, and examined it. It looked crudely crafted, with no trace of magical energy flowing within. It didn't appear to be a special demonic artifact, but Fell couldn't tell what it was made of, so he kept it for later study. He searched the deceased demon priest's body again, finding nothing but some strange black pills. "I just don't understand why these demonic spellcasters are so averse to using magical tools. Instead, they'd rather stitch their bodies together with those of magical beasts, transforming them into something neither human nor ghost." Matthews, briefly regaining some strength, stood up and asked, "All right, let's get back to the canyon outpost as soon as possible. Every moment we stay here increases the danger." Fell raised his eyebrows and chuckled. "Go back? Are you crazy? We've come all this way, and we've suffered such a huge loss. We should go straight to the supply depot and tear the roof off them." Boom! A violent burst of fire suddenly erupted from the depths of the dense forest ahead, and a thick cloud of smoke and dust rose. Damo Frankie felt the ground beneath his feet tremble slightly. These were the mid and low-level spellcasters of the Scout Regiment, using mass spellcasting to engage the hybrid beast regiment below. A few breaths later, a thick cloud of dust erupted in the distance, and the dull sound of bombardment continued. Even with a reconnaissance eye connected to his mind, he could not penetrate the flaming smoke to clearly see the battlefield. This was completely different from the permanent fortress at the canyon outpost, where he could wait and see to resist the demon army's attack. Supply transfer stations were set up every few dozen miles along the supply lines behind the demon front central hub. The demons built these transfer stations into small fortifications, stationing numerous spellcasting priests and berserker warriors to guard the war supplies shipped from the northern demon kingdom in the wasteland's rear. Within each of these transfer stations, a massive reconnaissance beholder was trained and stationed. If one station came under attack, the beholder would immediately transmit a warning signal through the mental network to the surrounding transfer stations, drawing massive demonic reinforcements and counterattacks. This was the primary reason why each time the Federation sent a small, isolated force of high-level spellcasters to raid supply lines, they were met with fierce resistance and often returned empty-handed. But today's attack was markedly different. After stealthily advancing to supply line 3, they encountered no significant demonic resistance. Frankie soared above the transit fortress and, with a powerful wind blade, severed the head of a scout beholder, silencing its persistent, shrill warning screams. The assault on the fortress lasted nearly a quarter of an hour, with no demonic reinforcements arriving from the other nearby transit points. The mages of the scout group quickly demolished the transit fortress's outer defenses. A flood of berserker demons and hybrid beasts poured out from the breach. As soon as they emerged, they were singled out by the lances of annihilation, their bodies shattering and falling to the ground. The annihilation spear's attack was truly formidable. Frankie thought bitterly, feeling a pity for using these precious annihilation ammo against these low-level berserkers. It would be great if a team of spellcasters specialized in using the annihilation spear, combined with the mystically enhanced binocular vision and magical reconnaissance eyes, could form an assassination squad focused solely on targeting high-ranking demon priests and hybrid beasts. It would be far superior to the current group of warriors in his own regiment, who were accustomed to manual casting and had terrible accuracy with the annihilation spear, often wasting several rounds to kill a single berserker. This change in perspective amused him somewhat. Just a month ago, he had believed that scout mages should fight alone behind the demonic headquarters north of the Evil Moon Mountains, fighting with blood and life to fulfill their glorious promise to defend human territory. If we had this kind of weapon earlier, perhaps we wouldn't have suffered such huge casualties. Frankie looked at the demon soldiers who kept falling and dying in front of him, and couldn't help feeling a little sad. The spellcasters of the scout regiment were all loyal members of the Orthodox Federation. Most of them came from the major magic academies in the southern border, or from wizard families close to the Orthodox factions of the Federation, and stood out and were selected to join the regiment. He gave up the chance to be hired as a spellcaster consultant by secular nobles, gave up the comfortable life in a lair other wizard kingdoms, and resolutely rushed to the Evil Moon Mountains to resist the invasion of foreign races, and then fell asleep quietly on the battlefield. Master Frankie, the scout mage in charge of reconnaissance, shouted at him, "The demons in the transit fortress have been wiped out, and we still haven't found any demon reinforcements from other stations." Frankie frowned and said in a deep voice, "Search carefully for the remaining demon soldiers in the fortress, and don't let go of a guy who is still breathing. No matter how serious their injuries are, as long as their bodies are not damaged and they are re-injected with a strengthening secret medicine, they can jump back into the battle. Don't leave them with a trace of vitality that can be recovered." He paused, and finally couldn't help but scolded, "Let the scout mages save the annihilation ammunition in their hands. Don't forget your identity as a combat mage. Without the annihilation gun, can't we use our own combat magic to kill those demon soldiers? Annihilation bombs must be used at the critical moment, because they were raiding deep behind enemy lines. The scouts often chose not to capture demonic prisoners. After all, without the constant infusion of the strengthening elixir, they would quickly weaken and die, making it unnecessary to waste time and energy transporting them back to Black Rock City. What about those sealed strengthening potions left in the transit fortress? Should we destroy them all as usual?" Frankie then remembered the repeated instructions from the scout commander, Sir Andre Weiss, before they set out. "If we found demonic strengthening elixir on the supply line, we must seize it intact and bring it back." It was a crucial raw material for accelerating the production of annihilation munitions. This thought instantly perked him up, and he ordered his standby scout mages to quickly enter the damaged transit fortress and begin counting and transporting the elixir storage tanks stored there. Perhaps the more tanks they captured, the more they could exchange for a full ration of annihilation munitions for their regiment, allowing them to avoid wasting ammunition in future operations. Reiner stood beside several super-large magic network teleportation arrays in the magic military factory. The soul fire in the eye sockets of the metal head flickered. He looked at the large number of rusty energy storage tanks that kept flashing out of the teleportation array, and remained silent. The production director of the military factory stood beside him, took out a handkerchief to wipe the sweat from his forehead, frowned and said, "What's going on?" Since the past few days, a large number of such garbage iron cans have been continuously delivered to the teleportation array. Some are empty, and some still contain some inferior liquid magic energy. The purity is very low. We need to recycle them and purify them again with blood summoning equipment before we can use them. It's too troublesome. Reiner sighed lightly and said, "It's okay. The Lord has ordered that the empty cans be taken to the iron foundry for smelting, and the liquid magic energy with insufficient purity be sent to the magic vehicle factory. Let them be responsible for the repurification work." Anyway, Lord Harvey said that this was battle spoil sent by the Federation. Good or bad, we could keep them. It wouldn't cost a penny anyway, so who would object to free metal? Reforging them into civilian iron tools wouldn't be a bad idea either. The production supervisor nodded, then tentatively asked, "Lord Reiner, then, should we continue to produce the ammunition for the new weapons? The Federation's orders are always too small. I only need to arrange 3 shifts to complete the production. Can't they purchase more each time?" Ever since Harvey transferred the manufacturing of the anti-magic weapon, the Annihilation Gun, to the Alchemy Exploration Society for a share of the pie, the Pioneer Territory's military factories saw a sharp drop in business. Besides repairing and maintaining the territory's magic guns, only 2 automated production lines, operated by alchemy beasts, were still producing magic gun bullets. The annihilation bombs, which only harm demons, are actually a byproduct of the magic energy bomb production. They don't even need to set up a separate production line to complete the task. A large number of beetle shells that have been depleted of pure magic energy can produce the annihilation bullets that the Federation desperately needs. The military factory, which used to be brightly lit and non-stop at night, is now unable to fully operate its 5 automated production lines during the day. A large number of skilled workers who are responsible for auxiliary work for alchemy beasts are idle all day long, picking their feet in the factory with basic wages. In the words of Lord Harvey, "The Federation has no money to purchase. What can I do? I can't ask them to pay in installments, can I?" Reiner couldn't help but recall the inventory of the castle warehouse, the whole box of gold pounds that had just been delivered, and the various precious magic materials and refined magic minerals that the Federation used to pay off debts. "My lord, how much does he sell an annihilation bomb to the Federation? He didn't really bankrupt them, did he?" Chapter 229 Technological Monopoly. Honestly, Harvey hadn't anticipated that the price he'd set for weapons and ammunition on a whim would so severely strain the cash flow of a vast continental magic organization like the Union. The beetle soul cores used to create the Annihilation Spear were sold directly to the Exploration Society for 500 gold pounds each. After they completed the production and assembly of the other components, they resold the finished weapon to the Union for several times the price. This was clearly a very reasonable price, after all, cheaper than even standard magical instruments. But the problem certainly wasn't the 1 gold pound per annihilation bullet. Harvey felt that with the Union's wealth accumulated over a century, they wouldn't be so unaffordable as to even afford annihilation spear ammunition. The most likely reason was that these noble spellcasters, who had always eschewed the use of money for transactions, had caused the internal funding issue. After all, the magical materials needed for daily research and experiments, as well as the precious minerals and plants used to craft magical instruments and potions, couldn't be easily acquired with just a few glittering gold pounds. However, Harvey's first order required an unconventional approach, proposing payment in gold pounds. This left the detached spellcasters of the Federation scratching their heads. Fortunately, the Alchemy Quest Society, with whom they had always worked closely, still had ample gold reserves. They occasionally accepted orders for alchemical weapons from nobles, and didn't mind paying with ordinary currency. After delivering the first batch of ammunition worth 5,000 gold pounds, the Federation paid entirely for the second batch of 30,000 annihilation bombs with funds borrowed from the Alchemy Quest Society. They even sent a last-minute message requesting some magical materials be used to offset the purchase costs, leaving Harvey feeling both amused and embarrassed. As for the Federation's attempt to use the inferior spoils it continuously delivered via teleportation array, the secret medicine storage tanks used by the demonic berserkers, to offset the cost of ammunition purchases, Harvey completely refused. Otherwise, All the demonic specialty garbage seized by the Federation in future battles would likely fill Harvey's territory warehouses. Of course, the glittering gold coins piled in the warehouse wouldn't realize their value simply by sitting there. Only a constant flow of funds could bring real results to Harvey's territory. Reiner unfolded his thick ledger and placed it on Harvey's desk, smiling wryly. "Sir, the gold pounds just arrived at the warehouse, and they'll need to be delivered to the town warehouse shortly. The Dragonstone merchants are waiting for our advance payment. Soap factories, shipyards, sugar refineries, textile mills, these new civilian production projects, all issued construction permits by Harvey, began one after another in early autumn, as the harvest season approached. The Ministry of Construction complained daily at City Hall meetings about the shortage of construction workers. Mines were working 3 shifts to intensify iron ore mining, and several alchemy beasts were even out of action due to the 24-hour work. The situation at the steel mill was even more dire. Due to the constant high-temperature operation and the need to complete Harvey's steel production quota, many workers suffered from heatstroke in the colder early autumn weather. Every day, unfortunate workers were carried to the territory hospital. "We're short of manpower. We're too short of manpower." Harvey flipped through the work report sent from the City Hall, repeatedly marking various items with red circles, muttering anxiously to himself. As Dallin took the freshly brewed hot tea from the guard and gently placed it on Harvey's desk, he pondered for a moment before speaking. "My lord, in the alliance we signed with the Federation before, wasn't there a cooperation agreement involving population migration and slave trade?" Pierce frowned and said, "Slaves? Those demon prisoners of war? I think they are completely worthless. These demon soldiers who have been injected with strengthening potions are very dangerous, and they need to be constantly replenished with potions, otherwise they will soon become weak. We can't always separate the soldiers of the defense force and keep a close eye on them working for us, right?" Harvey also shook his head with a wry smile and explained, "The southern countries have long since abolished the human slave trade. Alien prisoners of war are completely worthless to us, and we still need to waste food to feed them." He paused, thoughtfully saying, "When I proposed this cooperation clause, it was actually to lay a high-sounding and legitimate reason in advance for a series of plans later. With the Union's possession of its own developed lance of annihilation, it will undoubtedly continue its ongoing counterattacks against the demonic invaders entrenched in the Evil Moon Mountains. Once their weapons and ammunition reserves are sufficient, and their battle mages and warrior retinues have fully adapted to this new form of warfare, they will undoubtedly break ranks with the Church and the conservative wizard kingdoms. Using their proven record against the demons, they will formally declare to the human nations that the Spellcaster Union is fully capable of serving as humanity's core force against the demonic invasion and independently shouldering the glorious responsibility of protecting humanity. This will inevitably lead to a sharp decline in the faith and prestige the Church of Light has cultivated over centuries in the southern kingdoms. To maintain their faith among the nobility and the common people, the conflict between them and the spellcasters will undoubtedly intensify. Regardless of the presence of powerful foreign enemies, humanity, a highly intelligent race, has always been subject to internal strife. The fence-sitters and conservatives within the Federation, as well as the various organizations close to the Church and the 7 wizarding kingdoms, will be forced to choose sides and will no longer be able to sit back and relax and have their way. As for those who refuse to change, they can only wait for the Federation's orthodox spellcasters to become free and begin rounds of brutal purges. Once this round of counterattack in the Evil Moon Mountains is over, the war in the southern countries will be imminent. Moreover, this is a conflict between spellcasters and the Church. The nobles and ordinary civilians of the secular kingdom are just forced to be involved. Harvey stood up, walked to the window and sighed, turned to look at Reiner, Pierce and others who didn't quite understand the key points, and said softly, "Once a war involving extraordinary people breaks out in the human kingdom in the south, there will be a large number of displaced civilians. They will either rush to other areas where the war has not yet broken out, or flee to the deep mountains and dense forests where few people go to hide. But as the war gradually spreads, when there is no safety everywhere in the entire southern region, our chance has come." Fairholden and Matthews Willie were suspended in the air, looking at a demon supply transit station that was completely destroyed under their feet, looking at each other and laughing tacitly. "Isn't it almost time? Should we go back? My magic stones are almost used up, and the ammunition of the annihilation gun is almost gone. If we meet the promoted demons again, I'm afraid I will really leave my life here." This time, Fair did not refuse directly, but winked and teased, Matthews, you have been urging us to return every day during the past few days we have been out. I have never seen a high-level battle mage as cautious and afraid of death as you." He paused, and said dimly, "Haven't you ever thought about why I have been delaying my return?" Matthews was stunned when he heard this, and couldn't help but said angrily, "Are you doing this on purpose?" Fair looked at his expression and couldn't help laughing. "You really are. We assassinated a high-level priest of the church in Black Rock City. Even if our hands and feet are clean enough and there is no handle left, we have to find a way to get out and avoid the limelight. Do you really want to stand in front of those investigators every day?" As he spoke, a look of extreme disgust crossed his face, his voice gradually deepening. "Those hypocritical and shameless individuals within the Church of Light, even if they can't find any evidence, will secretly carry out various acts of retaliation against spellcasters." "Humph, we're merely responding in kind." The two exchanged words for a moment before a magical messenger suddenly appeared from the air beside them, flapping its wings and spewing out a scroll sealed with a magical seal before dispersing into ash. "Haha, it's Andre Weiss, the commander of the scouting regiment. The operation to cut off the demon supply line has concluded, and he's summoned us to rendezvous and reinforce." By the time the two reached the battlefield along the supply line at full speed, the fighting at the various staging fortresses along the way had already concluded. The scouting regiment's low-level spellcasters, leading a large number of warrior retinues, busied themselves on the shattered battlefield, constantly extracting the blood of recently deceased demon soldiers and hybrid beasts using confiscated energy tanks. Matthews asked in surprise, "What are they doing? Extracting the blood of demon soldiers and monsters? What can this thing be used for?" "Magic research experiments." The scout commander Andre Weiss stepped forward, nodded reservedly to the two high-level spellcaster colleagues, and explained with a smile, "I don't know what these alien flesh and blood materials with thin magic power are used for, but since Ali has made a request to me, we just have to do it." He paused and whispered, "But from what I heard, the mysterious partner who provided us with a gun of annihilation seems to be interested in all battle spoils from the demons, whether it is energy storage tanks or the blood of demon soldiers, as well as the flesh and blood materials of hybrid monsters. They accept them all." Many spellcasters who participated in the supply line attack battle were discussing privately that the most important ammunition for the gun of annihilation seemed to be made by relying on the transformation of the flesh and blood of the demons themselves, but no one knew the specific formula and production method. Fell raised his eyebrows at this and scoffed, "What? Are there some pretentious individuals within our ranks who think they can crack the formula for the annihilation munitions based solely on these speculations? Those foolish individuals, fixated on the sliver of profit at hand, wouldn't they tear up their alliance and turn their backs on us just after tasting a sliver of victory?" As early as a month ago, when the first batch of replicas of the annihilation spears, forged by the Alchemy Exploration Society, were delivered to the Federation, some within the Federation began to secretly instigate rumors that this new energy weapon was technically no different from the standard, mass-produced magical instruments of the past. It wasn't until the ammunition that arrived that some began declaring their intention to crack the manufacturing technology and formula through experimentation. However, despite all this time, no progress has been made. No matter how the research-oriented spellcasters tested and experimented, these annihilation bullets, resembling fragments of magic stone, possess no special properties. Furthermore, the mithril cores sold by the partner to the Alchemy Exploration Society for weapon crafting were instantly destroyed upon disassembly, and the magical fluctuations and inscribed arrays contained within them were completely undetectable. It seemed the only option was to accept the obligation and honestly purchase the weapons from the mysterious partner's agents. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230 Wolf Mage. The sun hung low in the sky, and night was about to fall. A group of church priests and Inquisition knights, clad in pure white robes, set up a makeshift camp on the open ground beside the road. Several bonfires were quickly lit in the camp, and several Inquisition knights, stripped of their heavy armor, busily gathered around the fires, adding wood and boiling water. The young deacon held a pot of hot water and walked to a middle-aged priest. "Sir, the tea is out, please have some hot water." The middle-aged priest frowned slightly, and said impatiently, "We should be able to reach Jackdaw Town tomorrow, right? We have been sleeping in the open air all the way, which is really tiring. The deacon sat cross-legged beside him and whispered, "Yes, if we get up and travel at dawn, we can reach Jackdaw Town as early as noon. However, I still don't understand why we don't go into the city to rest when we pass by Grizzly Castle. Isn't Earl Figan of Grizzly Castle a devout believer of the church?" "Earl Figan? Humph, it's true that he is a devout believer. But he offended the Federation because of some things before, and had to go to the capital of St. Valen in person to excuse himself. He just returned to the territory a few days ago and was immediately monitored by the Federation. He is in an awkward situation now. How can he have time to receive us?" The young deacon suddenly grasped the situation and couldn't help but ask, "So, is our mission to Jackdaw Town related to Count Figan's affairs? The Union is shielding the necromancer, allowing him to secretly conduct bloody and evil magical experiments." The priest nodded and succinctly explained the true purpose of their trip, ostensibly a routine tour of evangelism to the borders of St. Valen, but in reality, a covert investigation into the blasphemous incident involving the necromancer. After all, with witch hunters involved, the rumors were likely not groundless. Although the divine punishment cult operates in an extreme style, they will never let off any evil sorcerer who blasphemes our Lord. While most people may not support their actions in violating the peace covenant, they privately approve of them, the middle-aged priest said solemnly. Furthermore, according to sources planted by the church within the Union, the necromancer entrenched in Jackdaw Town has another, hidden identity. He is the author of the anonymous magical research paper published in the Union's bulletin, blatantly slandering the church's bloodline divine gift ritual, claiming it shares a common origin with the demonic madness potion. A necromancer, versed in advanced alchemy and having successfully cracked and replicated the formula for a bloodline-strengthening potion, had disguised himself as a low-level spellcaster, hiding in the remote regions of the Southern Kingdom, successfully evading the church's long-standing focus on similar targets. To suggest this wasn't a hidden conspiracy by the Union's top brass is a fool's errand. If it weren't for the attacks by the unnamed witch hunters, and the Union's targeting of Count Figan due to his involvement, the church wouldn't have been so quick to link the author of the paper, ostensibly Kilthuzid, with a low-level necromancer hiding on the outskirts of Jackdaw Town. But if we do this, we'll directly intensify the conflict with the Union. Spellcasters they secretly protect won't be easily caught with sufficient evidence to convict them. The young deacon's tone was thick with worry. Evidence to convict? No, we don't need to go through tedious investigations and report to higher authorities, nor do we need to inform the Union's duplicitous magical politicians in advance. Any magician who blasphemes the glory of the gods and seeks to covet the glorious authority will be directly sentenced by our Lord. We are merely agents of judgment, the priest replied with a chuckle. Aside from a few young deacons and priests who were unaware of the key details, the rest of the team consisted primarily of bloodline knights secretly planted by the Divine Punishment faction. There were 7 mid-level knights and 1 high-level knight. The middle-aged priest leading the team was a high-level combat priest who had retired from Black Rock City several years ago. "Alright, I'm telling you the truth because of your devout faith in my Lord. After all, you've always been by my side, and I've always been optimistic about your future." The middle-aged priest patted the young deacon on the shoulder and offered solace. "Tonight is our last night camping outdoors. Tomorrow, when we reach Jackdaw Town, we won't have to endure any more suffering." After a simple dinner, the group gathered around the campfire, led by the middle-aged priest, for their daily prayers. The High Knight Commander, who had remained silent, randomly selected several members of the Inquisition to take turns keeping vigil. The remaining priests and deacons retired to their tents and went to bed early. The young deacon was no exception. After forcing himself to read a few pages of canonical texts by the campfire, he too, wearily returned to his tent, extinguished the oil lamp, and lay down. He was half asleep for an indeterminate moment when he suddenly heard the dull thud of something heavy falling to the ground, as if someone had stumbled while getting up to go to bed. However, instead of hearing a cry of pain from the fallen, a second thud was heard shortly thereafter. This time, he also heard the crisp crunch of metal armor against the ground. Though not very distinct, it was definitely not an illusion. People were falling one after another? Were they the Knights of the Inquisition on night watch? Only they wore armor at night. The young deacon suddenly opened his eyes, rolled over, and instinctively groped around his cot on the darkness. He couldn't find any suitable weapons. After all, he was only an apprentice priest, and even the simplest healing prayers and radiant spells were not very proficient. But he finally touched something solid, an extinguished metal oil lamp. He slowly approached the tent curtain, about to lift a corner to peek in, when the High Knight Commander roared from outside. "Enemy attack! Knights of the Inquisition! Meet the enemy! Gather around me!" The warning roar shattered the quiet of the night, and the camp was instantly in an uproar. Then, a loud bang, and the dry earth trembled slightly. The Knight Commander's voice, shouting commands, suddenly stopped. Amidst a cacophony of screams and curses, the beast's muffled breathing was clearly audible, prompting the young deacon to finally lift a corner of the tent flap. The Knight Commander, a high-ranking inquisitor, was crushed beneath the mighty feet of a terrifying, human-like beast. Blood gushed from the cracks in his armor, only partially donned in panic, soaking the dry earth around him. This terrifying, humanoid beast, standing 3 or 4 meters tall, was the attacker. Its body was covered in thick black fur, its limbs immensely powerful. With a casual swipe of its claws, it swept aside a sword-wielding inquisitor, leaving 3 deep scratches on his solid steel breastplate. The most bizarre thing about it was its beastly head, a massive gray-black wolf's head, its triangular eyes gleaming with a faint azure blue. Its slightly open mouth revealed a blood-red tongue and sharp teeth, and its pointed ears flared to either side of its skull. Werewolf! How could a werewolf be here? The young deacon couldn't help but let out a low cry, instantly drawing the wolf-like beast's attention. Turning, its face revealed an eerie expression only possessed by humans, a sneer of derision and disdain. 2 more inquisitors charged forward, but resistance was futile against the wolf-like beast. A single swipe of its claws tore through the chest and abdomen of a knight, sending hot streams of blood and viscera splattering onto the ground. Another knight was lifted up by the neck, brought close to its blood-red maw, and bit down. The sound of flesh scraping against bone sent a chill through the surroundings. "It's an evil sorcerer." A sorcerer's transfiguration. The middle-aged priest also rushed out of the tent and joined the assembled inquisitors, surrounded and guarded by them. His eyes blazed as he stared at the werewolf standing in the center of the camp, muttering a silent prayer. He clasped his hands together, about to unleash a divine attack, but suddenly his entire body trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood as if the spell had backfired. Anti-magic fields. They've set up anti-magic fields around the camp. The young deacon then realized that the High Knight Commander had been so easily slain by the evil wizard transformed into a werewolf because he hadn't been able to activate his bloodline abilities. No wonder he'd been able to attack a group of bloodline knights single-handedly. It turned out to be an anti-magic field they'd planted nearby. He had other helpers nearby, equally powerful and eerie spellcasters. "Leave the priests behind," a knight of the Inquisition roared. "Ignore the deacons and priests, disperse and flee. All knights remain, fight, and hold off this evil sorcerer." With that, he charged at the werewolf with sword in hand, followed closely by 2 knights of the Inquisition who hadn't even had time to don armor. 4 or 5 Inquisition knights had already fallen in the camp, ripped open by the werewolf wizard's claws. The remaining knights changed their strategy, using the cover of their tents to surround and engage the enemy, hoping to buy time for the others to evacuate. The young deacon immediately rushed out of the tent, rushed to the middle-aged priest, and helped him to his feet. The priest was clearly suffering the backlash of the anti-forbidden magic field spell. His face was pale and his body was shaky. He could only bear the weight of his entire body on the thin shoulders of the deacon, and slowly and with difficulty walked out of the camp. Escape to Jackdaw Town. Follow the main road. There are warehouses and post stations along the way. The attacking spellcasters won't dare to attack us openly in front of civilians unless they want to start an all-out war. The middle-aged priest vomited blood again and weakly ordered. The shouts of battle gradually faded. The deacon supported the priest and groped their way to the main road in the dim moonless night. However, he was cautious and avoided walking directly in the middle of the road, instead carefully weaving through the dense trees beside the road. If the attackers were high-level spellcasters, they would undoubtedly use flight magic to search for the fleeing priests and priests along the way. In the dark night without bright moonlight, it would be difficult to spot their tracks from high above. After walking a few hundred meters, the lights of the campfires in the camps beside the road gradually disappeared from sight. The deacon breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the enemy did not pursue them in the direction of their escape, or perhaps the Knights of the Inquisition could still hold out for a while longer. Chapter 231 Special Meeting Gift. "Sir, what should we do next?" the deacon asked. This was his first time encountering such a horrific attack, and one involving an evil wizard who was a mortal enemy of the church. He was completely unable to calm down and think, and his expression was extremely panicked. The magical weapon used by the enemy to set up the anti-forbidden magic field has a very wide coverage area. We must leave this area as soon as possible and find a secluded place sheltered from the wind. Let me recover from the backlash of the divine magic temporarily. If the attacking spellcaster is only the shapeshifter just now, I am confident that I can fight him. The priest made a cautious decision. No need to go to Jackdaw Town. After I recover, I will turn around and return to Grizzly Fort to seek support from the church branch established there. Not going to Jackdaw Town? We have our church there too. The journey from here to Grizzly Fort is much farther than rushing to Jackdaw Town. The priest shook his head and said, "We can't go. The attack was too coincidental." Doesn't this just prove that the Federation is secretly monitoring this area? There is definitely a shocking conspiracy. The small church we built in Jackdaw Town is only guarded by 2 or 3 low-level priests and pastors. They may have been controlled by these spellcasters long ago. You're right. This is the first time I've experienced such a dangerous situation. If it weren't for you, the deacon was stunned mid-sentence, his eyes fixed on the woods beside the road. The middle-aged priest's heart sank, and he turned his head to look. A figure in a black wizard's robe slowly walked out of the dark woods. The wizard's hood perfectly concealed the man's face in the darkness. Judging from her slender figure, it seemed to be a woman. She raised one hand, revealing a crystal ball in her palm. The light around her seemed to be brighter. Above the head of this mysterious wizard, who seemed to be a woman, a dazzling starry sky suddenly appeared. Blasphemer! Evil wizard! The priest cursed with gritted teeth, his face pale. Evil, the mysterious wizard spoke, and it was indeed an unusually soft female voice, but the tone was cold and emotionless. Unprovoked attack on law-abiding research and casters, secretly recruiting young children to molest for fun, colluding with nobles to extort money from devout believers. Who is the real evil? The young deacon couldn't help but scold in a trembling voice. Nonsense. Those research wizards frequently conduct twisted experiments that blaspheme the gods, and they deserve the just punishment of the church. And those children, they are all orphans without parents, or from poor backgrounds. If the church hadn't taken them in, they would have starved to death on the streets. The offerings of the believers are voluntary and come from the heart. There is no such thing as collusion with the nobles. The female wizard sneered and said lightly, "That brainwashing thing you usually use is indeed quite effective. It not only deceives ignorant civilians, but even hypnotizes those within your own ranks." She raised the crystal ball in her hand. "Since you believe so firmly in your actions, why not let me escort you to the heavenly kingdom of the God of Light?" Before she finished speaking, the brilliant starlight reflected above her suddenly blazed. Sparks of light from the scattered stars reflected off the stars, shooting towards the priest and deacon nearby. The young deacon froze in place, stunned by the dazzling brilliance. The middle-aged priest suddenly shoved his shoulder, propelling him toward the incoming beams, while he himself dodged and tumbled to avoid the impact. In a flash, an arm, with half its shoulder blade attached, crashed to the ground. Blood gushed from the massive wound on the deacon's shoulder. The piercing pain lasted several seconds, sending him blind and nearly losing consciousness. He could no longer maintain his balance and fell heavily to the ground, writhing and wailing. The high-ranking priest, trapped within the anti-magic domain, was unable to unleash any divine power. Even with the young deacon shielding him from an attack, it offered no further opportunity to escape. The middle-aged priest, looking pale, gazed upon the deacon, who lay limp on the ground, his arm broken. He tremblingly pulled a golden seal from his bosom and roared in despair, "I am a high-ranking priest, summoned to St. Valen to investigate, under the orders of the cardinal. I come from Goris, the city of grace. By killing me, do you intend to reignite a full-scale civil war between the Union and the Church?" The female spellcaster sneered. Without waiting for the fallen priest to utter a word, she waved her hand, unleashing a gossamer mist of light. The mist shattered into several glass-like crystals as it left her hand, instantly grazing the middle-aged priest's neck. A dull thud was the sound of a head hitting the ground. Astrologer Melissa Penna, using her mage's hand, dragged 2 lifeless church priests back to the makeshift camp on the side of the road. Her fellow mage, transformed into a werewolf, had just concluded a bloody massacre in the camp. "Jin, I'm not complaining, but you're doing this, it's going to be a hassle for us to clean up," Melissa frowned, rolling her eyes as she surveyed the devastated camp. The werewolf mage's bones crackled, and he quickly transformed from a massive, 3 or 4 meter tall beast into a gentle, thin young man. It was none other than Melissa's classmate and close friend, Eye of Illusion, Kim Gavin. Stretching his body that was sore and swollen after the transformation, Jin chuckled, "What's the trouble?" He then squatted down, pressed his palms against the bloody ground, and silently chanted a spell. Soon the ground around him began to shake violently, and the soil suddenly rolled over and sank, burying the entire camp along with the bodies of more than a dozen church inquisitors and priests. Jin clapped his hands, stood up, and shrugged, "Don't despise me, you are the same. I can see you performing astrological magic across the forest. You are really the brightest light in the dark night." He raised his foot to rub the muddy ground that still exuded a strong smell of blood, and said embarrassedly, "It doesn't seem appropriate to bury it. The smell is a bit too strong. This is on the side of the official road, and people often stay overnight." Melissa resisted the urge to roll her eyes again, looked up at the gray sky, and said to herself, "It should be okay. There will be a heavy rain in an hour. After washing it away, there will be no trace left." Jin was stunned for a moment, and said with a smile, "You astronomical mages." Since the humanoid weather forecaster believed that there would be a heavy rain, the two decided not to stay any longer. They directly performed the flying magic and took off into the air, heading towards the Crow Town dozens of miles away. "By doing this, we've helped Mr. Kilthuzid and solved a major problem, right?" Jin, in mid-flight, couldn't help but ask his friend. "Well, from the perspective of revealing one's identity, it's certainly a problem. After all, the publication of that paper sparked significant dissatisfaction and opposition from the church, who repeatedly pressed the union to reveal the author's identity." Melissa pondered for a moment. "Besides, we didn't do this intentionally, it was just a chance encounter. If we hadn't had the anti-magic device Benoit gave us, we wouldn't have been able to easily defeat these guys. Among them are a high-ranking bloodline knight and a battle priest. It was an unexpected coincidence. These two high-ranking spellcasters, who had recently been in the Principality of Pharos, had been forced to seek the help and protection of Forum Observer Neumann during that dangerous mission to rescue their teacher. The fact that they owed such a huge favor, yet the other party didn't immediately demand repayment, left the three of them tossing and turning all night long. Fortunately, this fear was short-lived. Soon, the Spellcaster Forum broke a shocking news. The mysterious organization that founded the Forum had signed a partnership with the Spellcaster Union and had directly selected the Forum's talented spellcaster, Kilthuzid, as its representative in the southern region. Observer Neumann then individually approached Astrologer, Eye of Illusion, and Mithril Unicorn, assigning them a somewhat baffling mission: travel thousands of miles to the Principality of St. Valen, to the remote town of Jackdaw Town on the border of the Godspeed Mountains, to meet with the Forum's representative, Mr. Kilthuzid. Alchemist Benoit Kevin, codenamed Mithril Unicorn, chose to remain at his estate in Pharos. After all, their teacher, Duncan, although successfully rescued, was now severely disabled, with both limbs broken and requiring constant care and ongoing treatment. Benoit, skilled in concocting alchemical potions, was undoubtedly the most suitable candidate. The task of reaching St. Varen to meet Kilthuzid naturally fell to Melissa the Astrologer and Kim Gavin the Eye of Illusion. As they were on their way, they happened upon this furtive group of church inquisitors and priests. Using Melissa's expertise in astrological prophecy and parasitism, she overheard a plot to harm Kilthuzid and, without further ado, attacked and silenced them. "I didn't expect that the corrupt officials within the Federation would reveal Mr. Kilthuzid's true identity directly to the church, causing him trouble with the church's divine punishment faction. These fence-sitters and traitors in the spellcasting world are really despicable." Jin chuckled and said, "Goris is thousands of miles away. By the time they find out these people are missing, it will probably be several months later. By that time, the Federation will probably have already torn their faces and fought with the church. No one should be able to spare a hand to embarrass Mr. Kilthuzid. Moreover, they tried hard to cover up the crime scene and did not let go of any survivors who might escape and tip off the crime. They handled the situation very properly. I wonder if Mr. Kilthuzid is an easy person to get along with in real life. After all, he's a Forum agent. Although he's a high-level spellcaster like us, we still have to show him due respect." Melissa knew her best friend had a casual personality, so she couldn't help but remind him, "Mr. Observer will definitely give us new tasks later. When it comes to Forum matters, we should follow Mr. Kilthuzid's opinions and not act on our own like we did today." Jin nodded and smiled. "Don't worry. I understand the relationship. Isn't dealing with these troublemakers for him our gift to him? Chapter 232 The Informer. The Papal States, the City of Grace, Gors. Inside the sacred hall of the Cathedral of Radiance, the Pope's throne, high above, stood empty. 3 cardinals sat side by side, silently gazing at the arguing cardinals below. Tosa Ismail frowned and spoke first. So, is the intelligence provided by our informants within the Union true? Yes, the author of the paper, who goes by the pseudonym Kilthuzid, is a registered necromancer with the Union. Humph, but the low-level spellcaster level marked in the file is clearly a cover-up. Low-level? Necromancer? Hasn't the Union always discriminated against and excluded this faction? This is a good way to cover it up. Ismail raised a stack of white papers in his hand and asked a waiter to take it and distribute it to the other bishops. Name, Harvey Floyd. He was born in Golden City, the capital of the Principality of St. Valen. His grandfather was an ordinary city guard knight. His mother died of illness when he was young. His father was an apprentice knight who died from falling off a horse while drunk when he was 16. He sold his ancestral property and hired a retired court magic consultant as his magic enlightenment teacher. Later, he was admitted to a local undead academy in St. Valen. The tuition was actually raised by borrowing. His resume is as clean as a bottle of clear water. There is no sign of being secretly trained by the Federation. No, you should read the following content carefully. The problem is that after graduation, he did not choose to return to his hometown of Golden City. Instead, he went to a remote town on the border of the Principality of St. Valen and established a magic laboratory there. Cardinal Bamo sneered and said disdainfully, "What's so strange about this? Don't these guys who deal with corpses all day like to hide in dark corners and tinker with those evil magic research? That's what's strange." He hadn't been in that border town long when he offended the Union Station investigator. "I've reviewed the performance report sent back by the Jackdaw Town Church a year ago. Civilians reported him to both the church and the Union, alleging he had lured them into participating in his undead experiments. These actions seemed innocent enough. Necromancers always tread the fine line of prohibition. Secretly stealing corpses, raising rampaging corpse puppets to harm people, and leaking corruption and disease from their laboratories to contaminate the local area were all commonplace. The cardinals, armed with detailed intelligence, patiently read the thick, tome-like contents, gradually sensing something amiss. The spellcaster investigator who had been giving him so much trouble was suddenly assassinated after being dismissed. The Lord of Grizzly Castle, who had temporarily imposed taxes on him, was questioned and placed under surveillance by the Union. A witch hunter, who had been hiding his identity, died suddenly in his experimental estate. Also, for unknown reasons, he secretly left Jackdaw Town over a year ago. Utilizing a pioneering order purchased from the Earl of Grizzly Castle, he headed for the wasteland north of the Sacred Spine Mountains. He's been missing since then, never to be seen in the southern border. A knight commander of the Inquisition stepped forward and bowed, saying, "Besides this, we've also discovered that the Dragonstone Merchant Guild, backed by the Sereth family, has been secretly interacting with him. Some have witnessed caravans from the Dragonstone Merchant Guild traveling to Jackdaw Town, seemingly transporting large quantities of supplies to the wasteland." Ismail nodded and explained to the other bishops, "Chief Inquisitor Felipe is responsible for monitoring prohibited spellcaster violations in St. Valen. He dispatched an investigation team to St. Valen half a month ago, and they should be arriving there by now. We just have to wait and see what the results of the investigation are." Chief Judge Felipe, with a gloomy face, stepped out from the crowd and responded in a deep voice, "Your Excellency, please forgive me for acting on my own initiative. The order I issued to the investigation team is that no matter what the specific results are, the necromancer must be judged by divine punishment. Among the personnel accompanying the team, there will be a high-level bloodline knight who will be responsible for completing this task." Cardinal Bamoa clapped his hands and said, "It doesn't matter. The necromancer faction has always been like this." What's more, he publicly made such blasphemous remarks at the instruction of the Federation. Even if there is pressure from the two alliances, he should pay the price he deserves. Ismail did not comment on this arrangement. Compared with the recent turmoil in the Evil Moon Mountains, a necromancer hiding outside the national border was not worthy of too much attention from him and the other cardinals. Did the Federation's informant pass on any other important intelligence information? The chief judges in charge of intelligence liaison standing below were silent for a moment. Finally, Felipe stood up and said in a deep voice, "The informant, he also mentioned a secret involving the cooperation between the Federation and a mysterious spellcaster organization." This is closely related to their recent independent combat operations in the Evil Moon Mountains. Bamoa stood up suddenly and asked urgently, "Sure enough. Their recent actions in the Evil Moon Mountains, and the rumored mysterious magical weapons that were created specifically for the demons, who are their partners? The group of high elves hiding in the east? Or the sea people who have never interacted with us?" Felipe paused, and said with some embarrassment. The informant did not reveal the specific inside truth. He wanted to seek asylum, and made a request. He wanted His Holiness the Pope to personally preside over a new life ceremony for him. The sacred hall was suddenly silent. Ismail's chuckle echoed in everyone's ears. Haha, these so-called magicians who pursue truth and knowledge still have to kneel at the feet of gods when their lifespan is about to end, praying for the grace of life continuation. It's so hypocritical and ironic. Bamoa hesitated and said, "Hold a rebirth ceremony for a spellcaster? That's ridiculous. It takes us decades to train a martyr, and one ceremony will cost the lives of at least 3 martyrs. There is no guarantee of success. His Holiness the Pope will never agree," Ismail said dimly. "No, if the value of this information is high enough, I don't think His Holiness the Pope will refuse the other party's request. If the mysterious magic weapon obtained by the Federation really plays a decisive role in the war situation in the Evil Moon Mountains, we must not sit idly by. This is related to the Church's faith foundation and secular reputation in the southern border. This is our foundation. We must never let believers lose faith in us." "What? They can't make it?" Harvey sat at the desk and asked Reiner, who was holding a stack of work records. Reiner cleared his throat pretentiously. "Sir, it is true. The directors and workers of the shipyard are all transferred from the Ministry of Industry. They are all authentic wastelanders with clean identities. Most of them rarely come into contact with sampans, let alone large ships. There are quite a few rivers in the northern wasteland, but they are frozen for nearly half a year, which is not suitable for navigation at all. Fishermen who are good at fishing can only use wood to make a simple sampan that can barely float in the river to cast nets." Reiner changed the subject and continued, "However, if you are willing to purchase a sailboat from the southern border, transport it to the territory, and let them dismantle it for research, perhaps they can try to imitate it successfully." Halfway through his words, Reiner felt a little embarrassed and shut up. Procuring a sailboat wasn't a difficult task, but the problem was that the God's Spine Mountain stretched between the northern and southern continents. Even if Harvey did pay for one, he couldn't get it north. Without a navigable river connecting the two lands, a sailboat wouldn't be able to cross the mountains on its own. Harvey covered his face with his hands inside. He said slowly, "Contact George Santos of the Dragonstone Merchant Guild and ask him to help us hire some experienced shipbuilders, sailors, and helmsmen. We don't need too many, just people who can teach us how to build and sail a boat." Well, I actually arranged to contact someone early on. Mr. Santos said that no shipbuilders or sailors would be willing to travel all the way from their warm and humid southern coastal homes to the northern wastes. No matter how high the price, they feel their lives are in jeopardy, unless they're forcibly abducted. This left Harvey speechless, and he stood up and paced awkwardly around the study. As the frontier territory gradually expanded, a significant problem emerged: insufficient ground transportation capacity. Alchemy beasts capable of carrying cargo could not be produced indefinitely. Aside from the common camels and reindeer of the wasteland, Harvey had yet to discover any other large herbivores suitable for large-scale capture and soul transfer. Furthermore, the alchemy beast's carrying capacity was limited. Harvey's mines alone required almost 2/3 of his alchemy beasts to transport ore, not to mention the vast storage areas and other manufacturing facilities. Naturally, his attention turned to the adjacent glacial river. This river, originating from the towering Divine Spine Mountains, surged from the Jackdaw Ridge into the depths of the wasteland. Its wide channel, abundant in water, made it ideal for navigation except for the 3 months of semi-frozen winter. Halfway through their meeting, alchemist Chris hurried to the castle to join the heated discussion. "Sir, I'm more familiar with the situation in the Southern Territory than Reiner. As far as I know, not only the border region south of Jackdaw Ridge, but even the entire Principality of St. Valen seems to lack a large-scale shipbuilding workshop." He walked excitedly to the wall, pointed to a map of the Southern Territory, and patiently explained, 4 countries located in the central continent, most of the ships used for river navigation are purchased from Pharos. After all, it's known as the land of 1,000 sails, with countless official and private shipyards, large and small, The problem returned to the core difficulty of finding a way to buy ships, but still being unable to ship them back. Harvey scratched his head, staring at the map on the wall, lost in thought. In the end, was he still going to have to rely on a time traveler to build him from scratch? He asked Reiner to find him a piece of white drawing paper, which he spread out and smoothed on the desk. Based on what he had read in books and TV dramas in his previous life, combined with information from some online sailing games, Harvey could only tentatively list the ship's construction specifications. Ships sailing on rivers naturally have shallower drafts than seagoing vessels. Furthermore, the Glacier River is in a straight, flowing channel, and the water flow is enormous in spring and summer, so the vessel must be stable and resistant to capsizing. Most importantly, since they lack skilled sailors and boatmen, the boat, even if its design is a bit odd, must be easy to operate, allowing civilian workers to quickly master it with minimal training. This necessitates abandoning the masts, sails, and traditional rudders that require experienced sailors and helmsmen. Instead, a magically powered propulsion system will handle the ship's propulsion and steering. With this in mind, Harvey sketched out the new ship's exterior in a few strokes, leaving Reiner and Chris bewildered. "Sir, is this a boat? Why does it look like a giant pig trough?" Harvey chuckled awkwardly and explained, "The shape isn't important, as long as it's functional. Besides, even if it's a pig trough, it's made of sturdy iron." Chapter 233 Icebreaker. Several makeshift workshops with roofs had been erected on the flat piers of the ice-filled river. Dozens of skilled workers, drawn from the Ministry of Industry, bustled about, their work emanating from the constant clanking of hammers. Alchemical camels pull carts of shipbuilding materials, freshly delivered from the steel mill, into the workshops, where they were neatly stacked. Under Reiner's guidance, several blacksmiths had already pieced together the basic outlines of the ship's hull using rebar, a tapered bow to reduce drag while also ensuring winter icebreaking. A slightly wider midsection allowed for increased load-carrying capacity, while the stern narrowed to a square shape to facilitate the installation of the steering rudder, which would be linked to the monopower unit. The ship was approximately 6 meters wide and 30 meters long, making it more slender than a typical inland sailboat. The mast and sails were completely dispensed with only a makeshift wooden frame to create a half-finished cockpit, reserved for the monopower unit to be delivered and installed later. Normal wooden ships typically use resin and fish bladder glue to waterproof and bond the hull, but Harvey's iron ship clearly couldn't replicate this approach. Even using the highly adhesive rubber fruit, it likely wouldn't bond the steel as effectively, leaving the ship vulnerable to disintegration the moment it entered the water. So Reiner had to personally harness his alchemical souls, leading several working alchemy beasts and wielding mana-welding torches to secure the ship's steel frame. Then, piece by piece, thin iron plates delivered from the foundry were attached to the hull frame, hand-welding the ship together into a bizarrely shaped vessel. Chris had pre-coated all the metal materials used in the hull with rubber fruit pectin, effectively waterproofing and rust-proofing the ship, preventing it from rusting and breaking. This thing, can it really float in the water? Although Reiner had strictly followed Harvey's instructions and personally completed the assembly and welding of the iron ship, he still couldn't believe it completely. "My lord, if it sinks to the bottom as soon as it enters the water, we will have to salvage it. The steel bars and iron plates on it can't be wasted." Chris, with several alchemy apprentices, was fiddling around in the hull that was about to be completed, tinkering with some tricks. Hearing Reiner's words, he couldn't help but stick his head out and smiled. "You've followed Lord Harvey for so long, how can you be so untrustworthy of his wisdom? I am 100% sure that this ship can float in the river." He jumped out of the cabin, took off his gloves, and walked over to Harvey and Reiner. "My lord, the magic power unit and the transmission steering wheel have been installed." Harvey nodded, clapping his hands with satisfaction and smiling. "We'll have the workers apply a layer of rubber fruit anti-fruit gum to the hull. Once the hull is dry, we can start the sea trial immediately." The skilled workers assigned to the shipyard were completely bewildered by their duties these past few days. They could only blindly follow the instructions of Territorial Governor Reiner and Industrial Department Technical Advisor Chris. They spent most of their time doing simple tasks like carrying and applying glue, and had no experience in welding or manufacturing the ship. When they heard the Lord order the massive iron pig trough, which had taken days to piece together and weld together, to be pushed into the water, they froze in astonishment. The makeshift shipbuilding shed facing the river had been temporarily dismantled, and a large number of polished and transported rolling logs had been laid on the inclined ramp excavated under the iron ship. The workers used thick iron chains to tow the ship to prevent it from sliding too quickly. If the ship plunged headfirst into the riverbed, the work would be in vain. With everything ready, a dozen working alchemy beasts firmly pulled at the chains securing the boat. At Reiner's command, the alchemy beast slowly unwound the entangled metal chains, and the iron boat's bottom began to slide on the rolling logs, making a sharp metallic scraping sound. With a loud rumble, the iron boat slid smoothly into the river. The waterline he had pre-drawn on the hull was immediately submerged, but fortunately, the entire hull still remained above the water, a minor miscalculation. Everyone, including Reiner, watched in amazement. The iron pig trough, heavier than stone, did not sink to the riverbed with a gurgle, but instead wobbled and floated to the surface. The glacial river in early autumn was flowing rapidly. Harvey immediately called Reiner to command the alchemy beasts to securely tie the iron chains to the precast concrete piles to prevent his newly built boat from being swept away by the current. As Dallin, usually reserved in public, finally spoke, his shock barely concealed. Why? Why can metal float? Did you inscribe some special magical matrix on the bottom of the boat? Chris, who had long been chasing Harvey to understand the underlying principle, couldn't help but boast about his knowledge. Why can't metal float? Mr. Asdalin, you should be like me, learning more about the new knowledge of the times from adults, instead of clinging to those ancient historical texts. Not all phenomena incomprehensible to ordinary people can be attributed to supernatural means. Sometimes, mortal wisdom can surpass the power of magic. Chris, he's not even ashamed to parrot my words. Harvey explained succinctly, density. As long as the ship's structure is less dense than water, it will float. It doesn't matter whether it's made of wood or metal. As Dallin didn't ask any more questions, lost in thought. Harvey smiled wryly and shook his head, then continued to instruct Chris to direct the workers to finish the hull. While the hull and frame were welded from reinforced iron sheets, the interior cabins and decks couldn't be constructed from metal. They had to be laid out in the traditional way, using pre-planed planks brought from the lumber yard. The wood was also treated for waterproofing and corrosion resistance using a versatile rubber pectin coating and whitewashing, a technique the workers had long mastered. Carefully stepping onto the pre-assembled sampan, they boarded the iron ship. Finding the iron pig trough posed no risk of capsizing, they immediately set to work. Harvey led Reiner and the others aboard, realizing that when designing the ship, he'd focused solely on its primary purpose of transporting cargo, neglecting other supporting facilities. This had led to a slight oversight. The cockpit at the stern was drastically rudimentary, a wooden shed measuring just a few square meters. A large hole had been cut into the ground deck to connect the magical power core installed in the cabin below and the steering gear, designed by Chris. Turning this wheel will make the iron ship sail along the river at the desired speed and direction. No sails are needed, just liquid magic energy, like a magic car. Chris rambled on, explaining the iron ship's control system to Reiner and Asdalin. Harvey had provided the idea, and Chris was fully responsible for its design and construction. Reiner stroked the wooden steering wheel and asked in amazement, "So, this ship can be steered by just one person, without the need for a helmsman at all?" "That's incredible." While that was true, once it was put into operation, it would still be impossible for a single person to steadily steer a metal ship several dozen meters long across a surging glacial river. According to Harvey's previous knowledge of ship navigation, the minimum crew requirement for a small modern ship was at least a captain, a first mate, and a crewman. For nighttime sailing, an additional crewman would be required, with a captain and first mate taking turns steering the ship. Furthermore, if a longer voyage is planned, a technician skilled in the maintenance and operation of the magical power core will be assigned to serve as the magic version of the chief engineer. Otherwise, if the power plant fails due to malfunction, the iron-hulled ship will lose control and run aground. However, Harvey currently has no plans for a long voyage. After all, the icy river that runs through the territory is only safely navigable as far as the valley outpost. With a journey of a day and a night, there's no need to worry about power failure. Once the military dock at the valley outpost is built, the Northern Army will no longer have to travel on slow war beasts during rotations. They can reach the outpost directly by boat, down the river in less than half a day, which is much more convenient and faster. Harvey summoned Chris and redesigned the cabin design, adding a heating boiler and glass windows to the stern cockpit. Otherwise, even if the ship could break the ice in the dead of winter, the crew standing in the cabin would be frozen solid. Once all the finishing touches are completed, Pick a day with good weather for the official sea trials. We'll sail from the territory dock to the River Valley outpost, which will be a good opportunity to test its speed. After giving all the necessary follow-up instructions, Harvey returned to the territory castle. He had barely sat down at his desk, barely even had time to sip his water, when his magical brain beeped, alerting him to a message. Astrologer, Mr. Kilthuzid, are you there? We've arrived at Jackdaw Town on the border of St. Varen, as requested by observer Mr. Noemon. When can we meet you? How quick they are. Harvey couldn't help but sigh. I used my observer identity just 2 weeks ago to request that they come to St. Varen. I didn't expect them to waste a moment and rush to Jackdaw Town. However, he had no intention of inviting the 2 high-level spellcasters from the forum directly to the frontier territory. That would easily expose his embarrassing status as a non-high-level spellcaster, and many of the current circumstances within the territory needed to be kept secret for the time being. Disguised as Observer Noemon, they came to Jackdaw Town simply to establish a new network of connections. Bypassing the Union. The Astrologer, the Eye of Illusion, and the Mithril Unicorn are not spellcasters with Union backgrounds, but independent mages from ancient wizarding families, backed by the 7 sorcerer kingdoms. Kilthuzid, my apologies. My experiments are currently reaching a critical juncture, and I may need you to stay in Jackdaw Town for a few days. I will contact you as soon as possible to schedule a meeting. Astrologer, no problem. We have plenty of time and can definitely wait. However, there's one thing I need to inform you of in advance. On our way to Jackdaw Town, we discovered that the church has dispatched an armed investigation team specifically targeting you. Your true identity has been leaked by an informant within the Union. Chapter 234 New Visitor. Has someone within the Union revealed my true identity to the church? Harvey perked up, instinctively straightening his back and staring at the text message on the crystal screen of his magical brain, lost in thought. Although the 3 leaders of the Union, led by Mr. Scorching Lord, had directly promised him confidentiality and allowed Harvey to publish his research papers anonymously, the magical duel in Alayam meant that no matter how much Harvey concealed his true identity, if some privileged individuals in high positions within the Union were willing to investigate, they would still be able to trace it back to his true identity. However, Harvey was not particularly afraid of his identity being exposed. By now, he had laid out a series of arrangements, openly establishing himself as the real agent of the spellcaster forum, no longer needing to hide for the sake of his life and property. This was the main reason he'd used Observer Noemon's identity to invite high-level spellcasters from outside the Union to meet him offline. He urgently needed someone who could resolve the troubles posed by the Union and the Church of Light. He needed a superb bodyguard with tough tactics and unscrupulous actions. As Observer Noemon's agents and favored ones, these 2 high-level spellcasters were undoubtedly the most suitable bodyguards. Kilthuzid, thank you and Mr. Eye of Illusion for resolving my troubles with the Church ahead of time. This is undoubtedly a great favor. Astrologer, we're also acting under Mr. Observer's instructions, but we're not sure yet what his true purpose is in arranging this meeting, or what he needs from us. Harvey smiled faintly at the crystal plate, raising his hand to type rapidly. Kilthuzid, it's simple. You've already completed part of your mission. You know, I'm just a research-based spellcaster. Since I've been fortunate enough to become a cooperative agent between the Forum and the Union, my personal safety has become vulnerable to threats. Therefore, Mr. Noemon wanted to seek some necessary security for me. Astrologer and Eye of Illusion exchanged glances before the magical brain, their expressions alight with sudden realization. So Mr. Observer directed us here to serve as bodyguards for Mr. Kilthuzid. Jin sighed, feeling a mixture of laughter and tears. Melissa nodded in agreement. Well, I thought it would be an unacceptable price, but it's so simple. It seems that when we helped him solve the problem with the church investigation team, we accidentally completed our duties. Kilthuzid, but I must inform you that I cannot let you into my private laboratory at the moment. This is a cooperative secret that must be maintained as an agent. So you will have to stay in Jackdaw Town for a while. When the time is right, I will arrange a meeting with you. Jin frowned and said, if you won't meet with us, how can we complete our task of protecting his personal safety? Melissa said thoughtfully, it should be that there are some parts in the cooperation agreement between the Forum and the Federation that need to be strictly confidential. We should not explore too deeply. Just complete the protection work we are responsible for, so as not to cause unnecessary trouble and anger Mr. Observer. At the moment, it seems the main trouble facing this agent comes from the conservative factions within the Union. as well as various overt and covert obstructions and attacks from the church. As long as the two of them remain in Jackdaw Town and closely monitor any suspicious threats emanating from the southern border, they should be able to fulfill Mr. Observer's instructions. Astrologer, we understand your meaning. We will remain in Jackdaw Town. If there is any emergency, please feel free to contact us. We will meet again when the time is right. Harvey closed the magic brain device with satisfaction, sat at his desk, pondered for a moment, then raised his hand to summon the guards who had been guarding the door and gave them some instructions. Uriel, the newly appointed superintendent of the Frontier Territory Police Department, hurried to the Lord's castle in his crisp, dark gray uniform. Harvey, busily reviewing documents, said, "Please sit down and wait for me for a moment." Uriel cautiously walked to the sofa and sat down, subconsciously raising his mechanical arm to adjust the collar of his uniform. Then, he placed his hands flat on his lap, looking straight and serious. "Are you feeling comfortable with your prosthetic arm? Are there any problems? Have you had it serviced regularly?" Harvey suddenly asked, startling Uriel. He had assumed the Lord had summoned him to report on his work as a full-fledged superintendent, but he hadn't expected the question to be about his prosthetic arm's adaptation. Uriel's prepared remarks were instantly scrapped. "Thank you for your concern, Lord. Oh, well, I'm settling in very well. There haven't been no problems at all, either at work or in my daily life. I've also been following your instructions, visiting the repair department for regular maintenance and adjustments every month. I'm also responsible for supervising the regular maintenance of the other officers who have received prosthetic limbs." Harvey chuckled, waved his hand to calm him down, and asked gently, "I heard that Mr. Chris, the head of the alchemy laboratory, still comes to the police department frequently to harass, socialize and chat with you. Does this affect your daily work?" Uriel was stunned for a moment, his expression awkward. "Mr. Chris does visit the police department frequently. He even offered to disassemble our prosthetic limbs and adjust the parts for us. But everyone kept in mind the confidentiality regulations and politely declined." Harvey was so amused that he burst into laughter. After a long moment, he regained his composure and said, "Well, I have a special mission for you. It's a little different from the work of the Territorial Police Department. I need Jackdaw Town, a small border town located at the northernmost tip of St. Valen, boasts only one decent inn, which sees a slight increase in business only during the autumn hunting season. The high-quality furs and the thrill of mountain hunting still attract smaller nobles and landowners from the surrounding area for a relaxing getaway." Melissa and Jin, accustomed to luxury, had no choice but to rent the most comfortable suite on the second floor of the town's Winter Frost Flower Inn. From the living room window, they could overlook the town's bustling main street and small square. The Union's branch in Jackdaw Town and the Radiant Church's church are situated on opposite sides of the main street. Compared to Harrisburg and Golden City, this place is downright shabby. Even the smaller nobles with fiefs seem a bit rough and tumble. Jin chuckled softly, leaning against a street-facing window, a glass of ale in hand. Melissa sat at the desk in the living room, intently browsing through some newly discovered academic literature in the Magic Encyclopedia with the help of her magic brain. Without looking up, she replied, "I prefer quiet, less crowded places to those bustling capitals. This is a good place to live. Since I got my magic brain, I'll never miss out on cutting-edge news and important information from the magical world. No matter where I live in the southern continent, the more prosperous and comfortable a city is, the more constraints and restrictions a spellcaster faces. Branches and churches of the Union and the Church are densely populated throughout the kingdom south of the Divine Spine Mountains. Any radical action easily attracts the attention of both parties, forcing them to endure constant harassment and investigation. Furthermore, not all spellcasters enjoy navigating the vortex of secular power among the nobles, wealthy merchants, and the southern kingdoms. It would greatly hinder their practice of magic and their pursuit of truth." The two were chatting about the question of spellcasters' worldly and secular life when there was a gentle knock on the hotel door. "Who is it?" Melissa immediately alertly put away her magical brain device, stood up, and walked to the door, whispering. Jin also dropped his nonchalant expression and exchanged glances with Melissa, quickly making eye contact. Could it be that the Federation stationed in town had noticed their identities? That shouldn't be the case. Travelers like them, dressed elegantly and spending lavishly, would almost certainly be mistaken by the locals for young nobles on a hunting trip, especially a couple traveling alone and not wanting to be disturbed. The church was even less likely. After a few days here, They'd noticed that the church members in Jackdaw Town were reclusive and rarely active in the town. "You two distinguished guests, this is the personal attendant of a gentleman named Kilthuzad, here to visit you," the innkeeper said from outside. Melissa raised a brow, winked at Jin, who was standing by the window, and then opened the door. The hotel attendant bowed slightly, then turned away, revealing a tall, straight young man standing behind him. "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mr. Kilthuzad's attendant, sent to deliver a message. Please call me Uriel." Melissa gave him a slightly cold, polite smile, stepped aside to let Uriel in, and cautiously asked, "We have other direct ways to contact Mr. Kilthuzad. Why did he send you alone to deliver this message?" Uriel glanced around the room and noticed a thin, gaunt young man standing by the window. He looked to be in his early 30s, a perfect match for the veiled young woman before him. However, his expression seemed somewhat hostile. He clasped one hand behind his back, his bright eyes staring directly at him, revealing a dangerous, animal-like expression. Uriel quickly placed the suitcase he had been carrying on the coffee table. While opening the buckle of the suitcase, he explained, "Mr. Kilthuzad asked me to bring an alchemical device he designed and manufactured, and told me to demonstrate it to you two in person. So I can't show it to you directly through contact information." "Alchemical device? Show it to us in person." Melissa's curiosity was aroused, and she quickly walked to the coffee table. "Mr. Kilthuzad didn't tell us in advance, what exactly is this?" She suddenly stopped talking and stared blankly at the item in the box. It was a mechanical prosthesis with an exquisite structure and the beauty of metal lines throughout. Uriel then slowly continued, "Mr. Kilthuzad learned that your teacher had suffered severe limb injuries and disability in an accident. Even natural healing magic and alchemical potions could not restore him. So, he wanted to ask you too if you are willing to let your teacher undergo prosthetic limb transplant surgery." Jin stepped forward quickly and interrupted Uriel in a trembling voice, "No. It's impossible. Alchemical prostheses cannot be transplanted into living people. This is common knowledge known to most spellcasters. The Exploration Society has never made any progress in this research. Those experimental recipients who forcibly completed the surgery eventually had to endure the torture of amputation again, and many people died as a result." Melissa also whispered, "Yes, I have discussed this matter with Benoit before. After the operation, the transplant recipient will quickly have a rejection reaction, and the wound where the prosthetic limb is connected will suffer irreversible ulceration, causing pain several times more severe than when the original limb was lost." Uriel didn't argue or explain. Instead, he slowly stood up from the sofa, took off the leather gloves on his hands, unbuttoned his long-sleeve dress coat, and then gently rolled up the cuff of his right arm, revealing a mechanical prosthesis with a brassy metallic luster and strange patterns on the surface. Chapter 235, Goodwill and Promise. Is this an alchemical prosthetic arm? Implanted onto this living being before him, an alchemical prosthetic arm. Jin, with a somewhat unruly step, rushed to Uriel's side and pulled up his sleeve, which had only been rolled up to the wrist, revealing a brass-colored mechanical arm. Uriel pursed his lips and remained silent, allowing the young man to pull his sleeve all the way to the grafted joint at the elbow. "It's actually a prosthetic limb transplant. The secret lies in the mystery. Melissa, look. The repaired part of his severed limb shows no signs of erosion or necrosis at all. How was this done? Which master alchemist performed the surgery for you?" Melissa sighed softly at her best friend's incoherent speech and gave Uriel an apologetic look. Uriel, I wonder if you could share the details of the prosthetic limb transplant surgery? It's very important to us." Uriel nodded and, following Harvey's instructions, spoke slowly and solemnly. "My arm was accidentally disabled over a year ago. It's been about half a year since the surgery. Aside from some initial discomfort, my daily activities are no different from those of an average person with intact limbs. The only difference is that the mechanical arm is more powerful." He paused, then continued, "If you want to know how this was done, I'm sorry, as I don't know either. The transplant surgery required the cooperation of Mr. Kilthuzad and several spellcasters, including an adult proficient in healing techniques who assisted in the operation." Holding Uriel's robotic arm, Jin turned to Melissa and said, "This gentleman isn't a spellcaster, merely an ordinary experimental recipient. He has no way of knowing the specific details of the transplant experiment, but I can guarantee that Mr. Kilthuzad must have obtained this extraordinary technology from a forum." He then gathered himself, barely controlling his excitement. He politely addressed Uriel. "Forgive my earlier rudeness, Mr. Uriel. Could you please demonstrate your control of the prosthetic arm?" Uriel nodded, raised his robotic arm, flexed and extended it back and forth, then deftly repeated the motion of clenching and opening his fist. Finally, he grasped the heavy three-seater sofa in the hotel living room with one hand, lifting and lowering it with ease. "What are the side effects of the surgery? Will there be any discomfort or rejection?" Melissa asked cautiously. Uriel shook his head and answered honestly, "According to Harvey's instructions, there are no side effects, well, except that I couldn't control the strength skillfully at the beginning, and I accidentally crushed the shoulder blade of one of my colleagues. But as long as I practice more, I will be able to adapt soon." "Melissa, the teacher's injury is cured?" Jin sighed excitedly. "I really want to fly back immediately. Bring the teacher here, and let Mr. Kilthuzid complete the prosthetic limb transplant surgery for him immediately." Melissa reached out and patted his shoulder, signaled him to control his emotions with her eyes, then turned to Uriel and said, "Then, if we want Mr. Kilthuzid to complete this transplant surgery, what price do we need to pay?" "Price? The Lord has no such requirements. He just asked me to tell you that this is a little kindness and feedback given in advance for your help in the future. You don't need to pay any price." Melissa and Jin looked at each other quickly, and an idea flashed through their minds almost at the same time. Unprovoked kindness and help are the most difficult debts to repay. I watched Uriel pick up the box containing the metal prosthesis again and slowly leave the Winterfrost Flower Hotel. Jin looked at Melissa with a wry smile and said, "Now, we have to stay in this border town for a long time. Isn't his purpose to keep us here for some more time?" Melissa sighed lightly. "In any case, inform Benoit of the news first. When the teacher's injuries and body recover a little, we will consider bringing him here. Then what should we do in the next few days? We can't stay in the hotel every day and stare at the magic brain instrument, right? When I see the documents in the magic encyclopedia now, my head feels swollen. I never thought that learning and absorbing knowledge is such a painful thing." Melissa rolled her eyes and complained, "That's because you have had too little opportunity to come into contact with profound knowledge before. A traveler who has been walking in the desert for a long time will naturally be thirsty for a glass of water, but if he is thrown into a vast ocean of knowledge, I am afraid he will choke and drown after a few struggles. These days, there are a lot of nobles and wealthy businessmen coming to Jackdaw Town for hunting and entertainment. We just need to play this role well and try not to arouse the suspicion of the Federation and the church in the town." Chris took off the metal mask on his head, rubbed the sweat-stained crystal lens of the mask with his sleeve, turned to the alchemy apprentices who were busy in the laboratory, and shouted, "Okay. Today's work is over, everyone can take a break." The assistant handed him a cold towel to wipe his face and reminded him in a low voice, "Instructor, the people from the machine repair center sent someone here in the afternoon to remind you that the maintenance date of the mechanical prosthesis has arrived. When will you go there?" Chris wiped his face with a towel, frowned and said unhappily, "Machine repair center. I am an alchemist myself, why do I need them to maintain my prosthesis for me? Isn't this an insult to me?" He flipped through the work log handed over by the assistant, and found that it had indeed been a month since Mr. Reiner personally maintained and adjusted his prosthesis for him. "No wonder my legs have felt so much heavier than usual these past couple of days. I thought it was just from working so hard." Chris maneuvered his two silver mechanical legs over to the sofa and sat down. He raised his hand to signal the lab assistant to bring him the toolbox, and then he skillfully removed the heavy metal limbs. The alchemy apprentices gathered around, watching Chris dismantle his prosthetic legs and listening to his casual remarks about key points, invaluable knowledge. "Did you see it? The connection between the severed limb and the machine is the key point to complete the prosthetic transplant. What is needed is the soul suturing technology. The main soul of the transplant recipient and the secondary soul transformed and refined from the alchemical creation are bridged together in a special way. This is the real soul refining. Absolutely advanced alchemical technology." Chris took a metal syringe, drew a small amount of liquid magic energy and injected it into the liquid storage tank at the knee position of the prosthetic leg. Closed the hatch and tightened the screws. Alchemical prostheses not only need to be constantly adjusted and maintained for the physical mechanical parts, but the soul core contained in them also needs to be nourished and protected with rich liquid magic energy. Otherwise, it will gradually dry up over time, and the prosthesis will become a dead thing and can no longer be controlled. The group of alchemy apprentices were stunned. Although they couldn't understand it at all, no one dared to interrupt Chris's impromptu teaching. Chris was extremely pleased with his apprentice's performance. Although Harvey considered him a complete novice in the techniques of life transmutation and soul transfer, he could at least pretend to be a master in front of the other alchemy apprentices. My prosthetic legs were designed by Mr. Reiner, the territory's chief administrative officer. The Lord provided some support, but honestly, I think there are still quite a few flaws. For example, he pointed proudly at the metal casting on the sole of the prosthetic foot. The arch shape clearly doesn't conform to the human body. I've observed other people who've had prosthetic legs and found that their feet are slightly different from normal people's, which can lead to walking. Chris spoke incessantly, enthusiastically disassembling his prosthetic leg, having his assistant help him arrange the parts neatly on the lab table. He then reviewed each design flaw and casting process one by one. All in all, the design concept of this prosthetic is still too conservative. While it's clearly intended to mimic the form and function of a real body, I think it's completely unnecessary. Chris had always believed that the flesh and blood of highly intelligent creatures like humans hadn't evolved much, and aside from their brilliant brains, they were practically useless. Since they possessed soul technology that rivaled the creative power of gods, why couldn't they be more daring and absorb the strengths of other races to enhance their own frail structures? The towering wings of an ancient dragon, the mighty torso of a frost giant, the magical eyes of a high-ranking demon, the sturdy tentacles of the abyssal sea creatures. If the souls of all these creatures could be transformed into alchemical prosthetics and then transplanted into a human body, then that would truly be the feat of artificial god, the feat countless alchemists had longed to achieve for centuries. What a shame. Chris smacked his lips, waking up from his unrealistic fantasies. Master Harvey keeps harping on about scientific ethics, experimental guidelines. He seems to be disgusted by my suggestions and ideas. He even refuses to install the octopus of the wolf spider beast on me. Sigh, never mind. Having two alchemical prosthetic limbs forged using soul refining technology and a custom-made mechanical arm is good enough. As for the transformation of the other body parts, I'll figure out how to slowly complete them after I've performed well for a while. Chris waved his hand, signaling his assistant to reassemble the prosthetic leg parts he had just disassembled and reattach them to his leg. Half an hour later. Oh, Master, why is the two-way gear at the right knee missing? Huh? Why is there a toe missing on my left foot? I clearly saw it on the table just now. The apprentices frantically searched for parts they had lost. Chris slumped on the sofa, his hands covering his face. Bring a stretcher, take me to the repair center. Chapter 236, Church Withdrawal. Damo Frankie, the mage leader of the 100-man scout group, sat in the camp tent and asked in disbelief, "What? Are you sure you didn't see it wrong?" A small group of demon soldiers really appeared near the Broken Tooth Valley. The scout mage, who had rushed back to the outpost camp with a spear of annihilation on his back, nodded and said, "Sir, you are absolutely not mistaken. Whether it is the footprints of mounted monsters or the remaining traces of the demon soldiers setting up camps, we are very familiar with them." Frankie was stunned and said, "How is it possible? We have deployed 3 regiments of mage scouts in the entire Evil Moon Mountains. How did they secretly avoid the defense line we set up and crossed the mountains into the southern border? Along the entire Evil Moon Mountains, there are only 3 mountain gaps that allow the demons to march on a large scale to invade the southern border. These include the hilly highlands where the Federation has built permanent fortifications, the Eagle's Beak Canyon defended by the Church's garrison, and the Green Mountain River Beach where the Seven Nations Wizard Alliance is stationed. Furthermore, the demons seeking to enter the southern border had to risk crossing the treacherous, snow-capped mountains, a feat difficult for ordinary demon soldiers. Only powerful demon priests, on par with high-level spellcasters, would occasionally forcibly leap over Evil Moon Mountain to launch surprise attacks on the human coalition south of the mountain. Could it be that there's another defensive weakness at Green Mountain Riverbank? Frankie shook his head. Impossible. With a recent slowdown in demonic activity, the Wizard Kingdom Coalition has regained control of Green Mountain's defenses and even deployed significant additional forces. Compared to the heavily fortified passes of the Church and the Federation, the Green Mountain Riverbank, where the 7 Wizarding Nations Coalition is stationed, has historically been a weak point. It has been the site of numerous battles since the outbreak of the war between the two races. At the height of the conflict, the Demon Army even directly captured Green Mountain Riverbank and marched southward to the outskirts of Blackstone City, forcing the human race to pay a heavy price and spend years pushing back. Therefore, Green Mountain, the bloody battlefield of the war between the two races, has always been the focus of the three parties of the human alliance. It is impossible to ignore it easily and allow any demon army to enter. Frankie stood up and walked to the map of the area hanging on the wall of the tent. He stared at the human coalition stronghold closest to the cliff valley, and suddenly turned to his scout mage and asked, "We are the scout team responsible for monitoring the area. How long has it been since we contacted the church's Inquisition army stationed there?" The scout mage was stunned for a moment, and replied in confusion, "Sir, we haven't paid attention to those guys since we started the counterattack. The church has always been dissatisfied with our excessive focus on the defense area they are responsible for, and thinks we are overreaching." Frankie's heart sank when he heard this. He raised his hand and pointed heavily at an Inquisition army camp near the Broken Tooth Valley, and said in a deep voice, "I have a bad feeling. I'm afraid something happened to the Inquisition army station nearby." A fierce gust of wind carried several figures down from the sky, and aroused the screams of birds and beasts in the originally quiet wilderness and dense forest. Frankie and Raphael appeared in the storm tornado, followed by several mid-level scout mages who were carried by them from the air using flying magic. "I think this is a completely unnecessary worry." Raphael, the chief mage of the regiment who was also in the scout unit, tugged at his standard robe that was messed up by the wind, frowned and complained to Frankie, "Maybe it's a branch of a demon army that invaded the southern border before, and was accidentally left behind in the south of the Evil Moon Mountains and didn't have time to evacuate back, so they have been hiding and wandering around here." Frankie shook his head, completely disagreeing with the statement. "How is it possible? How many strengthening secret medicines can they carry? Can they last for years and still have the strength to be active? If they are really an isolated army left here, they would have died of weakness due to lack of medicine." Raphael shrugged and said nothing. "No matter how they got here, send a few scout teams to search them out and wipe them out. With the annihilation gun in hands and the scout mage's reconnaissance skills, it's no different from slaughtering a few pheasants." He paused and sneered disdainfully. "In theory, this area is the church's defense zone, but it is common for us to clean up their messes and wipe their asses. This group of hypocritical trash would probably prefer to stay in the parish, holding their scriptures all day to fool those stupid believers." Frankie smiled bitterly and advised, "When we get to their garrison camp, don't curse all the time. I don't want to fight on their territory. After I go back, I will be questioned and investigated by the Alliance Committee. I will have to stay up all night to write a self-criticism report." Raphael curled his lips and was about to make a few more sarcastic remarks, but several scout mages who were sent to the church garrison camp in advance hurried back. "My lords, something really happened. The gate of the Inquisition's camp is open, and it's empty and in a mess. There are no signs of attack or battle, but there is no one left." Frankie was stunned and said in a cold voice, "What? There is no one in the camp? Where is the Inquisition of the church? If I remember correctly, there are 1,000 Inquisition soldiers stationed here. Even if they leave the camp to patrol or perform combat missions, they will at least leave behind a few people responsible for staying behind and communicating. It is impossible for them to disappear without a single one left. Sir, you'll know when you go and see. Not only is there no one in the camp, but even the Holy Light beacon tower built on the hillside, which is required to have someone on guard at all times and light the beacon to sound the alarm at any time, has disappeared." Raphael finally realized the seriousness of the problem and frowned. No wonder this group of demon remnants appeared nearby, but we didn't receive any notification from the church. It turns out that there are no judgment soldiers left here at all, which is equivalent to a huge defense gap, allowing those damn demons to roam around at will. A scout mage who followed behind him said worriedly, "Sir, this group of demon remnants roaming around is not a small number. Judging from their marching traces, there are at least several hundred people, and they are carrying mounted monsters. If they cross the fortifications of the Judgment Army, there will be large villages and towns where civilians live to the south." He is a local spellcaster from the Western Territory. His hometown is a fertile farm near the Broken Tooth Valley. He couldn't help but subconsciously worry about the safety of his hometown and his people. "Quick! Use magic to send a message immediately and notify the nearest spellcaster unit to rush for reinforcements. Let all the scout mages active in this area spread out and lock onto the movements of the remaining demon troops as soon as possible." Raphael suggested softly, "Should we notify the high-level spellcaster regiment and let those adults who can provide flying support cooperate with us to wipe out this demon army?" Frankie sighed and said self-deprecatingly, "The last supply line attack was mainly based on our scout mages, and we used them as bait. This has caused most of the high-level spellcasters to secretly be dissatisfied. If the matter is not reported to the commander-in-chief, who can command them? The temperature in the western region in early autumn has not yet dropped sharply. On the flat and fertile black soil, golden wheat grows. In a few days, it will be the harvest season. An old donkey cart creaked along the dirt road. The driver, dozing off, tugged at the reins, trying to keep the animal from straying from the path. Dense forests flank either side, and the cart could easily overturn if not carefully. The donkey suddenly stopped, its ears pricked up, and a lone neigh escaped. The driver, looking sideways in confusion at the woods beside the road, noticed a rustling sound in the bushes. The plains of Broken Tooth Valley were rarely home to large wild animals, and with the church's long-standing presence there, even refugee bandits were afraid to venture nearby, making it unlikely to be bandits. But the footsteps in the woods grew heavier, as if there were more than one person, and the heavy breathing of an animal. The driver froze in his tracks, about to shout out a question. Suddenly, a four-legged beast, even larger than a camel, burst forth from the dense forest. A strange figure, clad in bright red armor, rode on its back, shouting in an incomprehensible foreign language as it charged towards the donkey cart in the middle of the road. The driver's hair stood on end as he watched helplessly as a flash of icy light struck him headfirst. In his final moments of unconsciousness, a single, despairing thought filled his mind: how could the demons be here? Where had the knights of the church gone? The morning mist thickened as a horde of ferocious, crimson-skinned demons, mounted on terrifying beasts, emerged from nowhere and stormed into the peaceful and prosperous village, shattering the tranquility. The roars of the beasts, the snarling laughter of the aliens, the cries of the civilians, and the thud of blades piercing flesh intertwined to create a brutal, apocalyptic scene. Flames shot up from the thatched roofs, blazing infernos illuminating the sky. Dozens of strong, young villagers gathered spontaneously, wielding iron farm tools in vain for a moment. But before the demonic cavalry charged, they were reduced to miserable, headless corpses, lying scattered across the village streets, mercilessly trampled into a bloody mess by the demonic beasts. The elderly, the weak, women, and children desperately sought shelter, but the demonic soldiers' keen perceptions ferreted them out one by one, forcing them against the still-burning barns and houses with their blades. The demonic soldiers' gazes held no trace of hesitation or pity, only a searing, bloody brutality and murderous intent. Screams echoed, and blood flowed down the dirt roads, staining the ground a dark red. When the first rays of morning light pierced through the thick smoke, the small village that had once housed hundreds of people had been reduced to ruins. Only the shattered walls, still lit by the embers, and the remains of mangled corpses lay scattered everywhere. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 237: Corruption Plague. Golden City, the capital of St. Valen. After an early autumn rainstorm, the entire city was filled with a damp, decaying smell. Even the icy temperature that plummeted at night couldn't dispel this murky, dull feeling. The lower town, where the common people lived, was always chaotic and noisy at night. Numerous taverns and brothels, open only at night, lit up brightly, desperately trying to attract customers wandering the streets with cheap drinks and the sweet smell of cosmetics. The drink was cheap, low-quality sour ale, a large drink for 2 copper coins. The women who stood on the street corners solicited customers for a reasonable price. Taking someone to an inn for the night cost only 30 copper coins. If you couldn't bear the inn fee, you could take the woman back to her place for 20 copper coins. Benjamin pushed open the door of the tavern and spotted a drunk burly man huddled at a table in the corner. He frowned and walked up to him quickly, grabbed his greasy and dirty collar and asked, "Damn it. It's not even dark yet and you're so drunk? Have you done what I told you to do?" The drunken burly man grinned and said, "Ah, Benjamin, why are you here? Come on, sit down and have a drink with us." This guy, nicknamed Rat King, is one of the gang leaders in this block in the downtown area where taverns and gambling dens are everywhere. He has about dozens of minions who work for him to make money, as well as a large number of pickpockets, beggars and streetwalkers under their control. "Stop talking nonsense. I'm not here to drink with you today." Benjamin pushed away the wine brought by the waiter and whispered, "Where are the people I want? It's been a week, why haven't I seen any of them?" Are you worried about it? The Rat King was stunned, then came to his senses and said with a wry smile, there have been a lot of troubles in the lower city recently. The higher-ups are watching too closely, so it's not convenient for us to take action, Benjamin said angrily, then go to the nearby countryside or some distant towns. In short, you have to do the job if you pay, otherwise give me back all the money. Facing Benjamin, his childhood friend and former captain of the city guards, the Rat King didn't dare to lose his temper easily. He could only patiently say, go outside? Those country folk are much more barbaric than the city people. As long as they can have a bite to eat, they will never sell their children easily. He hesitated for a moment and asked, Benjamin, which big shot are you working for now? If you don't tell me the truth, my brothers and I won't dare to go all out. Benjamin didn't answer. Instead, he raised his hand and gently pointed out the window, allowing the Rat King to see the towering church bell tower in the distance through the tavern window. The Rat King sighed, all right, I'll do my best. Even if the harvest isn't great, I'll use the street kids and beggars under my command to make up the difference. Don't worry, I won't embarrass you in front of the bigwigs. But as for the reward, Benjamin snorted, held up 2 fingers, and chuckled, double it. My superiors don't care about the price, as long as the person you send him is satisfactory. This is definitely a good deal for you. But before the Rat King and his minions could begin to pursue this lucrative business, they encountered a thorny problem. A strange epidemic had suddenly struck the capital. At first, everyone thought it was just a common cold plague, as the weather was indeed colder than usual this year. Even at the dawn of autumn, St. Valen, located in the northern part of the southern border, already felt a bit chilly. But as those unfortunate souls who had inexplicably contracted the disease quickly died in the streets, people gradually realized something was amiss. While they still suffered from coughing up blood and weakness, patches of dark green mold had appeared on their skin. Their abdomens were swollen, bursting with a loud thud at the slightest prod, sending foul-smelling entrails cascading onto the ground in a stream of green fluid, a sight both nauseating and terrifying. This was definitely no ordinary cold plague. More and more people were experiencing the same symptoms, and the interval between onset and death was extremely short. Within 3 to 5 days, they suffered a painful death. Those who had come into contact with the sick and the corpses also began to develop the same dark green mold. Neither herbal dressings nor bloodletting could cure the disease. Fear quickly spread throughout the lower city of the capital, and more believers flocked to the cathedral to pray and seek help. Lower-ranking priests and pastors performed holy water masses and holy light ceremonies, but to no avail. The capital was forced to seal the gates between the upper and lower districts to prevent the strange disease from spreading to the upper city and the royal court, home to the nobles and grand dukes. The same outbreak gradually spread to the surrounding villages and farms. However, in the remote countryside, where there were no churches or parishes, a large number of sick civilians flocked to the capital seeking treatment and help, but were ruthlessly blocked outside by the city guards. Finally, on the eve of the situation becoming uncontrollable, the bishop of St. Valen's Cathedral of Glory stepped forward. He publicly declared that the necromancers and evil alchemists were behind the conspiracy. Their secret magical laboratory within the capital had suffered an irreparable leak, unleashing the horrific plague and infecting a large number of innocent people. The church also stated that no current treatment could combat this horrific plague. Even those infected bathed in holy light would soon die in excruciating pain. However, the church would not sit idly by and reported the situation to the Church of Glory's headquarters in the City of Grace. Pope Zie has led a team of cardinals and high-ranking priests in tireless efforts to develop a divine potion that can mitigate and contain the symptoms of the plague. The Archbishop has also issued a sharp rebuke to the Union branch in the royal capital, Jinhu City, demanding they bear full responsibility for the shameless shielding and connivance of the evil spellcasters who caused widespread illness and death among the civilian population. Spellcasters in the capital are in a state of panic. Pressured by both the church and the nobility, the Union branch is forced to launch an internal investigation, arresting numerous ordinary spellcasters living in Jinhu City, regardless of their status as necromancers. On the central street of Upper City, the Union branch in St. Valen sits adjacent to the Alchemical Quest's workshop. Union officials, clad in formal robes, sit in a meeting room in the branch's main hall, engaged in a heated discussion with their hurriedly arrived colleagues from the Quest. This plague has absolutely nothing to do with necromancers, nor could it be an experimental accident caused by alchemists. If even the church priests who are skilled in healing arts cannot purify this plague, Will the necromancers be oppressed, expelled, and killed at will by them? They have long ago released the plague into the Papal States out of revenge, turning it into plague paradise, right? The gray-haired head of the Federation branch said. In any case, the top priority is to report this matter to the Ulay headquarters as soon as possible. We alone cannot resist the pressure from the church and the nobles. Even if they don't find any solid evidence of guilt, I'm afraid they will soon take direct action against us. The high-level alchemist of the Exploration Society who came to contact and discuss with them also nodded in agreement. His Majesty the Grand Duke sent his personal guards to surround our alchemy workshop and strictly restrict the personal freedom of the alchemists. Even if we want to leave Jinhu City now to avoid the limelight, it's too late. The most troublesome situation was the inability to find the perpetrator. Compared to the church's prestige among the people, the Union had no way of changing public opinion in this incident, and could only swallow this loss for the time being. The branch director turned his head to look at a young spellcaster in the conference room who had remained silent throughout. He said solemnly, Mr. Dirt, what are your thoughts and suggestions on this? Dirt Holden frowned slightly, looked up at the anxious people in the hall, and said sullenly, I sent a letter to Darius yesterday. If nothing goes wrong, I will receive a reply tomorrow. My uncle has close ties with Alea and should be able to obtain timely assistance for us. The director sighed and thought to himself, let's hope we can hold out until help arrives. Spell Shield friend McCollin accepted a thick stack of letters from his assistant. These were personal letters delivered directly to him by spell messengers. Huh? Why did that nephew of Fell's send me a letter from St. Valen? Fran casually waved his hand, snatching up a small letter opener. With a few slashes, he cut open the envelope, which was stamped with a personal wax seal, and casually scanned a few lines of the letter. Someone. Quick, someone. The assistant hurried back and forth, looking at his panicked boss in confusion. Hurry and find the branch report that St. Valen sent a week ago. The one reporting the unknown epidemic in Jinhu City. Since its founding, the Spellcaster Union has always operated with a strict exterior and a relaxed interior. With the exception of matters related to the demonic invasion, most matters are handled by their respective internal departments, without the need to escalate to the Supreme Council or the Three Chiefs. Meetings are only held to vote on resolutions when the war in the Evil Moon Mountains takes a turn for the worse, or when disputes involving multiple factions arise. This resulted in a highly bureaucratic and lax approach among most of the Federation's internal officials. Unless a war report arrived via a dedicated express line, even a red-stamped urgent document would linger for days before receiving a response or processing. To spellcasters, who are typically arrogant and indifferent to the mundane world, an outbreak of disease in a particular city seemed all too commonplace. Bickering and blaming each other between the Church and the Federation's branches in various countries was a frequent occurrence. Unless direct conflict erupted, most cases were simply brushed aside. An unknown plague of corpses. The Church claims it was caused by necromancers and alchemists, with the Federation's support and connivance. Grand Oak St. Valen has directly ordered the siege of the Federation's branch in Golden Radiant City and the mass arrest of ordinary spellcasters in the capital. The Church has also dispatched combat priests and knights of the judgment. Fran quickly read through the report, which had apparently been ignored and set aside, and felt a sinking feeling in his heart, a vague sense of foreboding. The Church is directly trying to provoke hatred among secular nobles and ordinary people against the spellcasters of the Federation. Chapter 238 Frame Up. A country estate, approximately 10 miles from the St. Valen capital of Golden City, lies secluded. It lies secluded, nestled on a fertile riverbank, surrounded by lush forests. The main structure is a classically styled tower-style villa, its stone exterior covered in dense vines, lending it a vibrant air. A group of teenagers, roughly 14 or 15, gathered around the fireplace in the villa's main hall, discussing anxiously. Teacher Morel has been with the investigative officers in Golden City for 3 days. Why hasn't he returned? No news has come back. Has something happened to the teacher? Teacher Morel was once the court magic advisor. Those investigative officers and the Church's inquisitors from the capital shouldn't dare to disrespect him, right? The teenagers debated, but nothing was clear. This was a small, privately owned magic academy founded by a spellcaster. The academy's sole teacher, Morel, formerly the court magic advisor of Jinhu City, opened his country estate after retirement and enrolled children of commoner backgrounds with spellcasting talent, offering them free instruction in magic. A week ago, a strange plague broke out in Jinhu City, and soon after, cases began to appear in surrounding towns and villages. This remote country estate, isolated from the outside world, was fortunately spared the danger of the plague's spread. But 2 days later, a team of church inquisitors and noble guards arrived from the royal capital, armed with a personal warrant of investigation issued by the Grand Duke, and abducted the old mage, demanding he accompany them to Jinhu City to cooperate in the investigation. The group of young magic apprentices felt their core was shattered. Although 2 older teenagers stepped forward to calm the group and temporarily maintain the academy's operations, as time passed, Teacher Morel never returned, and no news came back. A sense of foreboding grew within the academy. I want to go home. My home is in Willow Town. I heard there's a plague there, too. I'm worried about my parents and my sister, the youngest child murmured timidly, tears welling in his eyes. I want to go back too. I live in Golden Glory City, in the lower town. I heard a lot of people have died there. The 2 older apprentices who stepped forward to maintain order were the ones who had served the old wizard, Morel, the longest. The boy, named Terran, had already passed the assessment and earned full apprenticeship, and the girl, named Lilith, was supposed to receive full apprenticeship this winter. Lilith pulled out a handkerchief and tried to soothe the sobbing young students. Before leaving, our teacher told us not to leave without permission. There are cases of the plague everywhere, both in the city and the surrounding countryside. The situation is volatile and unsafe, Terran, with a much more resolute character, said in a deep voice. Although the servants have secretly departed, the food stored within the manor will be enough to sustain us for several months. Patiently await news from our teacher. Don't let your imagination wander. Continue your daily homework and never slack off in guided meditation. If you have any questions, please come to Lilith and me. With a gentle gesture, he allowed Lilith to continue soothing the anxious young apprentices while he left the villa to inspect the grounds. After the last few servants had urged the groom to depart, Terran closed and locked the gates, even rising several times during the night to double-check that every door and window was securely sealed. Just as he was rechecking the outer courtyard gate, he suddenly caught sight through the iron fence of the only straight road connecting to the manor. Dust billowed in the distance, and the sound of horses' hooves flew. A figure in a standard black robe, mounted on horseback, galloped towards the manor gate. The hooded figure on horseback raised his hand, and a flash of white light flew out, striking the brass lock hanging from the door latch with uncanny precision. With a clang, the lock shattered, and both rider and rider rushed into the manor. The man in black robe dismounted and pulled back his hood, revealing a messy head of red hair. How many apprentices are there in the academy now? Gather them as soon as possible and leave here with me. Terran glanced at the Federation emblem embroidered on his sleeve and thought to himself, what a young mid-level spellcaster. Sir, are you from the city? I wonder if my teacher, Mr. Morel, is safe. Dirt Holden frowned slightly and said in a cold voice, civilians were instigated to attack the Federation's branch in Jinhu City. The spellcasters who stayed in the branch were forced to fight back. As a result, they were judged by the nobles and the church for harming civilians without authorization and violating the covenant regulations. Now the Judgment Army and the combat priests are leading the royal city guards to besiege the spellcasters trapped in the city. He ignored Terran, who was stunned by the news, turned around and walked straight to the villa, and continued, a large number of spellcasters in the city have been attacked and arrested. Your teacher may not be spared. They have now attacked us without any scruples. I risked escaping the city just to evacuate the young apprentices of the Magic Academy near the Royal City. The public Magic Academy of the Federation closest to the Royal City had been purged and attacked by the Judgment Army overnight. There were heavy casualties in the academy. Without any hesitation, Dirt immediately rushed to this private academy that had not been affected, hoping to transfer the apprentices in advance before the arrival of the Judgment Army. Lilith, who was guarding the hall, also heard the conversation outside and trembled. Where else can we go? To the neighboring wizard kingdom of Darius. Dirt shook his head, his expression grim. We can't go there. I'm afraid all the roads leading to Darius are blocked. The church and the nobles of St. Valen are just waiting for spellcasters to come to them. He pulled 2 crumpled pieces of paper from his pocket and said gravely, it's too late to wait for support from Malaya headquarters. Let's head north. The blockade and security measures there are much more relaxed. Someone has already contacted a prominent figure on the border who will provide us with safe haven. As long as we can escape safely and make it there. Terran nodded and immediately gathered the young apprentices staying at the manor, instructing them not to carry too much luggage to avoid encumbering them. They should only carry enough water and food for 3 days. Dirt looked at the group of frail, childish-looking magic apprentices standing before him and couldn't help but sigh. I hope that Mr. Friend McCollin in a lair can really point out a way out for him and these innocent children this time. Chapter 239 Divine Grace Potion. Benjamin had spent the past few days in an inn in the lower city, anxiously awaiting a reply from the church's prominent figure. The towering walls of the royal capital divided Jinhu City into the upper and lower districts. Due to the outbreak, strict entry and exit controls were in place. No matter whether they were nobles or merchants, they had to pass rigorous inspection by the church's inquisitors before moving to the upper city to temporarily escape the plague. Anyone showing signs of coughing up blood or abdominal distension would be barred from entering. No one could use connections to gain access. Even this couldn't stop the spread of the plague. Yesterday, he had heard rumors that recently relocated rural nobles and wealthy commoners had been infected in the upper city. Fortunately, the church urgently sent a batch of divine potions from Goris, which greatly slowed the outbreak and spread of the plague. Otherwise, even the Grand Duke himself might have been forced to temporarily evacuate the royal capital for safety. More and more people were infected with the disease outside Jinhu City. All the city gates were completely sealed, forbidding outsiders to enter. However, ever since the people learned that the church had sent the divine potion, desperate civilians, sickened by the disease, stormed the gates daily. Within the city, many believers similarly gathered, surrounding the glorious church in the lower city, hoping to seek the divinely granted potion to save themselves and their families. The bodies of those killed by the plague were piled up and burned, and even in the upper city, the strong stench of burning bodies could be faintly smelled. In the evening, there was finally a gentle knock on the door of the hotel. The Rat King looked somewhat bewildered. After all, he had not entered the upper city through the formal inspection process, but had sneaked in through some underground tunnel known only to members of the underworld. What should I do now? Damn those evil sorcerers. They created this horrible plague, and even my men have been unfortunately infected. Benjamin's eyes narrowed, and he immediately pressed against the door, trying to block him out. Wait. I'm not infected. Can't you see? The Rat King anxiously grasped the door frame and forced his way in through the gap. He took a breath and said, I'm here to ask you, what should we do with those children now? I've gotten all the people for you, and now they're all in your hands. When will you send them to that big shot? Benjamin rolled his eyes, slumped in his chair and said weakly, Are you still thinking about making money in business? Now that the plague is rampant, who would dare to accept living people sent from the lower city? That lord hasn't contacted me for several days. Now it's important to save my life. I have to find a way to get a divine potion from the church, otherwise if I really get infected with a disease, it will only take a few days to lose my life. In the prayer room of the glorious church, Priest Malfoy was smiling and looking down at a wealthy businessman who was lying at his feet. The other party was a little fat and bloated, and at this moment he was curled up on the ground with unusual piety, his body trembling slightly. His only son had recently returned to the city from his country estate and, that same evening, was found to have contracted the plague. A terrifying dark green mold had begun to appear on his skin. In just 2 days, his stomach had swollen like a woman about to give birth, and he vomited foul-smelling black, semi-coagulated blood every few hours. If this continued, he might not even make it tonight. Why didn't you personally attend the glorious mass last month? Has your faith in our Lord wavered? Priest Malfoy asked gently. My lord, my faith in my lord has absolutely not wavered. Please save my child. I only have this one son. I beg you, Tisk. The potion sent from Gors is for use by His Majesty the Grand Duke and the nobles of the royal court. It's too scarce. I can't give it to you casually, Malfoy explained slowly. Wait a little longer. New potions will be delivered in a few days. I'll keep an eye out for you. The wealthy businessman raised his head, tears streaming down his fat face. He reached out and grabbed the hem of the priest's robe, begging desperately. My Lord Malfoy. I'm afraid my child won't even make it through tonight. Please be flexible and give me a potion. I am willing to donate half of my property to the church to prove my piety and devotion to the Lord. The priest tilted his head slightly, beckoning a deacon to come forward. He took out a potion in a glass bottle from the box in his hand, helped the wealthy businessman up, and handed it to him. Never mind. This potion was originally used by the priests themselves. Take it and save your child's life. Don't forget the promise you made to our Lord. The wealthy merchant's eyes widened, and he swallowed in disbelief. He held the bottle in his trembling hands and excitedly kissed the back of the priest's hand. "By the Lord, Your Excellency, I will dedicate my entire life to our Lord and will never let him down." Malfoy smiled and allowed the priest to send him away. He then whispered to the deacon, "Send in the next person seeking medicine." After receiving 4 or 5 wealthy merchants and minor nobles from the city who came seeking medicine, Malfoy announced the end of his reception for the day as the church bells tolled at dusk. Although he often interacted with these people, he did not feel annoyed or tired at all. Instead, he felt a sense of satisfaction and joy. These people who used to like to play the game between the spellcaster and the church were now so humbly begging him for favors. Malfoy felt a strange sense of holding the power of life and death in his hands. With a drug capable of controlling the plague, they could easily control the lives of these people and completely sway the nobles and Grand Duke of Jinhu City to the church's side, forcing them to finally take action against the blasphemous spellcasters. Following the church's instructions, after secretly spreading the plague to cause panic among the populace and nobles, they would then use the divine potion to win over the city's nobles and rulers, reversing their previously wavering stance. Once the Union's influence in Jinhu City had been completely eliminated, they would then begin distributing the potion in large quantities to treat the civilian population. Initially, they would need this group of ignorant believers as cover and pretext, inciting hatred and fear against the spellcasters, forcing the Union members in the city to retaliate in self-defense, thus giving them a legitimate pretext to take action. Even if the situation calmed down, the Union headquarters in Alea would have no legitimate reason to negotiate with them, and would be forced to silently accept the blame, severely damaging their reputation and public opinion in the southern kingdoms. This was a brilliant strategy that killed 3 birds with 1 stone. Not only did it secure the support of the nobles and rulers, it also enabled him to expel the Union's influence and, at the same time, use the opportunity of treating the sick to convert more believers for the church. Once this matter was fully accomplished, his accumulated merits would likely be enough to allow him to advance further, no longer confined to the humble position of presiding priest in St. Valen, but to return to Gors and ascend to the position of cardinal. Chapter 240 Heading North. After days of continuous travel, the group of young magicians, led by Terran and Lilith, were exhausted. They had already traveled approximately 100 miles north from the capital of St. Valen, Golden City. Initially, they had been able to blend in with the civilians fleeing the plague, with Mr. Dirt driving the covered carriage along the official road. However, 2 days ago, 2 young apprentices suddenly became infected with the plague. Mr. Dirt immediately split the group into 2, replacing the covered carriage with a lighter 2-wheeled carriage. He continued to drive the infected apprentices ahead, leaving marks along the way for Terran and Lilith to follow closely behind on foot with the healthy apprentices. Mr. Dirt. Water, please give me some water. I'm so thirsty. The young apprentice thrust a slender arm from the carriage, grasping in vain at the air several times, uttering a faint groan of pain. Dirt pulled the reins of the carriage and whispered, "Okay, I'll give you some water." He pulled a leather water bag from his waist, but instead of opening it and handing it to the sick child, he pulled a clean white handkerchief from his sleeve and carefully soaked it with water. Then, he stepped into the carriage and gently placed the damp handkerchief against the boy's chapped lips. Throughout the journey, Dirt closely observed the condition of the infected patients around him and keenly discovered the key to slightly delaying the onset of the plague: drinking water. The infected patients drank copious amounts of water, which subsequently caused abdominal swelling. It seemed that the water they drank acted as a catalyst for the rapid growth of the virus, rapidly causing the formation of numerous dark green plague mold patches on their skin. Therefore, upon discovering that a child among the magic apprentices had contracted the disease, he began to strictly control their daily water intake, providing only the minimum amount of clean water needed to meet their basic needs, despite their pleadings. Another young man in the carriage took the damp handkerchief and urged, "Mr. Dirt, please get out. Don't stay here. We might infect you." "Let me take care of her." Dirt nodded, climbed out of the carriage, and hopped off. He pulled a thin string from his pocket and tied it to the trunk of a prominent tree beside the mountain path. Gently twisting his fingers, he conjured a magical bell from thin air and attached it to the string. This was an incredibly simple zero-ring technique, also known as a cantrip, easily learned by most magic apprentices. With a tug on the string, the bell automatically chimed, providing a direction for Terran and Lilith, who had fallen behind, to follow him closely. After securing the string, Dirt braced himself against the tree trunk with one hand. He felt a surge of blood boiling in his chest, and he doubled over, coughing violently. With a gurgling sound, he spat out a large pool of dark red, partially clotted blood. He covered his mouth with his sleeve, suppressing any noise. He fished a pill from his pocket, popped it into his mouth, and chewed it. After swallowing, he leaned against a tree trunk, closed his eyes, and rested for a few minutes before slowly rising. As he left, he muttered a spell, covering the pool of vomited black blood with dirt. The problem must lie with the fleeing civilians. To avoid the church and aristocratic troops manning checkpoints along the way, Duarte had to lead a dozen teenagers, disguised as refugees, blending in with the crowds as they headed north. This allowed them to slip through the most heavily controlled areas without suspicion or interception. But soon, some in the refugee group began to show symptoms of the plague, first a fever and cough, then abdominal distension and vomiting blood, and then skin blotches. The symptoms rapidly worsened after 3 or 4 days, and those infected would fall into coma. After discovering that some of his apprentices were also infected, Dirt decisively separated from the main group, leading the children and beginning their journey through remote mountain roads and paths. To prevent further infection, he split the group into 2 groups, one in front and one behind, each without contact. He then led the sick child in the lead. After another day and night of persevering north, they would reach the place Mr. Fran McCollin had mentioned, called Jackdaw Town. Following his instructions, they could contact the reclusive figure living nearby and hope for rescue. Harvey finished lunch and prepared to return to his room for a good nap before continuing his work on the alchemical prosthetic in the afternoon. Having promised the 2 forum members who remained in Jackdaw Town, providing him with safety and security, that he would assist their teacher, Duncan, with prosthetic limb transplants, he couldn't easily break his promise. The model and style of the prosthetic limbs he had previously designed weren't specifically designed for spellcasters, but rather were more general purpose. With the unfortunate Chris serving as the experimental recipient for the transplant, Harvey gained a wealth of experimental feedback on spellcasters, allowing him to begin designing new prosthetic limbs and addressing some of the previous flaws. As soon as he changed into his comfortable and soft pajamas and lay down on the bed, Asdalin hurried into his bedroom. "My lord," 2 members of the Jackdaw Town Forum sent an urgent message. Harvey frowned and propped himself up to sit up again, muttering, "What's the matter? They brought the disabled teacher to Jackdaw Town so quickly? I haven't even designed a prosthetic limb yet." Asdalin shook his head. "No, it's something else." He turned and walked into the living room, brought the magic brain device on the desk to Harvey's bedside, and explained, "Half an hour ago, as usual, I was checking the single-way communication from the forum for you, and I received this message from forum member Mr. Fashield. Recently, Harvey has been fully immersed in the prosthetic design experiment and has not been paying close attention to the forum's developments. Most of the time, Asdalin goes online to handle some simple permission operations for him. After all, alchemical life only needs to recharge and does not need to sleep, making it more suitable to be a forum administrator than Harvey's flesh and blood body. Magic Shield, Mr. Clothuzid. Please contact me quickly. King St. Valen has encountered an emergency. The church and the nobles have slandered the Federation for harboring banned spellcasters and spreading the plague in the city. They suddenly attacked the Federation branch in the city, arrested a large number of spellcasters, and closed the Continental Teleportation Array. LA is currently unable to send assistance as soon as possible. We ask for your help to accept a group of mage apprentices from Jinhu City and try to provide some shelter to ensure their safety." Harvey's heart skipped a beat. He frowned and muttered to himself, "How could this happen? Spellcasters spreading the plague? The church and the nobles are joining forces to attack the Federation." He looked up at Asdalin and asked, "Is this the message just sent?" "What's the matter with the 2 forum members in Jackdaw Town?" Asdalin replied calmly, "The group of mage apprentices have arrived in Jackdaw Town. Through the method provided by Mr. Shield, they contacted our warehouse liaison in the town, and then were monitored by 2 spellcaster members and detected an abnormality. So they immediately sent you a warning. These 2 forum members are very responsible for his safety." Mr. Fadden actually delayed sending the message until the apprentices were about to arrive. He seemed to have vaguely sensed that there were some problems with this matter. It seemed that he was worried that the spies and fence-sitters within the Federation would leak the news and sell out these apprentices to the churches and nobles along the way. Reply to the 2 forum members and ask them to take the children to the foot of Jackdaw Ridge. We will immediately send the defense force stationed on the mountain to pick them up. Not appropriate, as Dallin spoke up decisively to stop them. My lord, the two forum members revealed that among these spellcasters who came here for refuge, there are obviously some infected with a plague. They must not be allowed into the territory, and our soldiers must not be allowed to come into contact with them. Chapter 241 Reception and Treatment. Swelling of the abdomen and coughing up blood, moldy patches on the skin, contact transmission. Harvey read the first-hand information from the two forum members in Jackdaw Town, then compared it with the alert sent by Mr. Fallon on the forum, and immediately felt that the situation was not good. This infectious disease sounded like a combination of plague, Ebola, and schistosomiasis. However, these three well-known and virulent infectious diseases would not cause mold on the body while the person is still alive, nor would even the abdominal fluid change color after death. His first thought was the batch of magic vaccines he had arranged for Egno and Chris to develop a few days ago. These drugs were originally intended for prevention and had all passed clinical trials. Most of the territory's residents received free injections arranged by the city hall. Plague vaccine, malaria vaccine, smallpox vaccine, cold blight remedy, enhanced, bloodworm vaccine, enhanced with therapeutic properties. Harvey stared at the long list of vaccines and remedies on the infirmary's pharmacy list, feeling uncertain about picking a specific cure for this strange disease. Furthermore, if the physicians dispatched to treat it not only failed to cure the disease but also contracted it, returning to the territory and causing widespread infection among the local population, that would be a disaster. From the descriptions of the two forum members from Jackdaw Town, it seemed that most of those who had fled thousands of miles to seek his protection were young apprentices. Their physical fitness was undoubtedly inferior to that of strong adults, and they likely wouldn't last long. He frowned, pondering for a moment, and then sent a reply to the magic shield on his magic computer. Kilthuzid, Mr. Magic Shield, are these apprentices from Golden City connected to the Union? Or are there any children among them who have close ties to the forum members? The meaning of this statement is very clear. Harvey is dissatisfied with Fashield's practice of acting first and asking for permission later. If these people have no connection with the Federation and have no relationship with the forum members, why would he take the risk to take them in and shelter them? Forum members have always followed the principle of equal exchange when doing things. Fashield, I'm sorry to cause you trouble, but the person who led this group of young apprentices to seek refuge is named Dirt Holden. He is a descendant of Mr. Son of Flame's family, his only nephew. Okay, it turns out that I owe someone a favor, and now I'm here to ask for repayment. Harvey smiled bitterly and got up from the bed. I have to help with this no matter what, he instructed as Dallin while getting dressed. Notify Pierce to send the defense forces of the mountain outpost to Jackdaw Town and contact the Federation branch in the town. I need their full cooperation to control the nobles and civilians stranded in the town and prohibit anyone from leaving the town. He paused and added, I would like to ask the two forum members to assist the defense forces in controlling the church personnel in the town. They are all low-level priests and priests. It shouldn't be too troublesome, as Dallin hesitated and said, My lord, doing this will cause dissatisfaction from the church and the lord of Grizzly Castle. After all, you are only the lord of the Pioneer Territory, and Jackdaw Town is the fief of Earl Figan. Harvey chuckled and said lightly, Earl Figan? In a few days, when those infected refugees from Golden City arrive at the foot of Grizzly Castle, I'm afraid he won't have time to make things difficult for me. As for the church, it dared to openly tear its face with the Federation in the capital of St. Valen. Why should it hide and maintain superficial peace? Their primary goal right now is likely to attack the Federation, and they're too busy trying to cause further trouble. Harvey, having rarely summoned the entire Frontier Territories management, held an urgent meeting to discuss the group of infected magic apprentices who had entered Jackdaw Town. All previously developed vaccines must be brought over for clinical validation. If they prove ineffective, they must immediately begin developing a targeted cure, without losing any time. For safety reasons, the personnel assigned to contact the patients must be led by Dallin and Reiner. After all, they are alchemical beings, their steel bodies unconcerned with viruses and plagues. Pierce could also accompany them to assist. For high-ranking vampires of ancient times, any toxin or plague is ineffective against them. At most, it's just a matter of food safety. Aside from these three, all other personnel and soldiers must strictly adhere to quarantine regulations, wearing protective suits coated with rubber fruit and absolutely avoiding direct physical contact with the patients. All those sent there after completing vaccine trials and experimental treatments were not allowed to return to the territory immediately. Instead, they were required to undergo a week-long quarantine in a warehouse, and only after showing no symptoms of infection could they be released from surveillance. Near dusk, a group of soldiers dressed in strange attire, led by two mysterious figures nearly 2 meters tall and swathed in black robes, marched from the foot of Jackdaw Ridge into the town in a mighty procession. Amidst the astonishment of the townspeople, they proceeded directly to the Federation branch established in the town. About half an hour later, more than a dozen officials from the Federation branch stationed in Jackdaw town sprang into action, each leading a separate group of soldiers to the residences of various nobles in the town. Before nightfall, the only main road in and out of the town was barricaded, and a group of soldiers set up camp alongside the road, completely sealing off the town. "What are you doing? This is Earl Fagan's territory. Why would the lord of a pioneer territory outside the border send troops to blockade this place?" The young noble, shocked and enraged by the sudden visit, questioned tremblingly, looking at a group of Union spellcasters in black robes and dozens of strange soldiers wrapped in robes behind them. "I'm sorry, a strange epidemic has broken out in the capital, and infected refugees have fled all the way to town. For your safety, please do not leave your residences. If you show symptoms of infection, we will send someone to provide treatment," Donnie, a slightly balding Union clerk, explained gently. "No. I don't trust you spellcasters. I need to go to the church and verify the whole story with the officiant and the priest. Please let me go." The young noble seemed to have grasped a lifeline, and his tone suddenly became firmer. A black-clad officer immediately emerged from behind the spellcasters. He wasn't wearing the full body coverings that the others wore. His eyes were crimson, and his tone was cold and sinister. "Going to church? The priests there have already been infected with a plague. Do you want to die going there now?" Temporary sheds were quickly erected in the town's small square. Each shed featured wooden partitions, with a hollowed-out hole in the middle just wide enough for an arm. This was Harvey's temporary epidemic prevention measure, designed to minimize physical contact between doctors and patients while ensuring smooth administration of medication. The town's permanent population was relatively small, so over 200 heavily armed defense soldiers, led by the Union spellcasters, began door-to-door inspections. They quickly identified locals suspected of being infected. Upon questioning, they learned that most of them had accidentally come into contact with the Mage apprentices. The more seriously ill apprentices were housed separately in a vacated warehouse, whereas Dallin and Reiner monitored them, conducting drug trials and providing treatment. Once everything was ready, as Dallin carried the young spellcaster, Dirt Holden, who was unable to rise and in a daze, out of the carriage. He appeared to be in critical condition. While his abdomen wasn't noticeably swollen, the skin exposed outside his clothes was covered in dark green, circular mold spots, including a number on his neck and face. Reiner opened the box filled with vaccines and deftly extracted a metal syringe. He began injecting him with all the available magical vaccines, following adult dosages. The dying, red-haired young man before him had been specifically ordered to be saved by Lord Harvey. If the drugs failed to work, a soul transfer device would be immediately delivered to town, and a soul transfer surgery would be performed on him, transforming him into a metal-clad alchemical being. The drugs took effect silently. After 4 or 5 doses were injected into Dirt's arm, as Dallin administered a dose of the recovery potion commonly used by spellcasters, bringing him back from his coma. "How are you feeling now?" Dirt groaned in pain twice, then said weakly, "Water. I need some water. I'm so thirsty," as Dallin extended a metal finger and gently pressed on his chest and abdomen. Finding no signs of swelling or ascites, he then took a jug of water and held it to his lips, watching him gulp it down. "Where are the children I brought with me?" After drinking the water, Dirt visibly felt better. He forced himself to sit up in bed. Looking at a mysterious man shrouded in a black robe under the dim light, and asked cautiously. Reiner, standing nearby, whispered, "They're all housed in another room. You were so careless. Knowing the plague could spread through contact, you still bought food from the townspeople. Now there are cases among the townspeople." Dirt lowered his eyes apologetically and whispered, "I had taken precautions, separating the infected and healthy children. I didn't expect the plague to be so severe." He was halfway through his words when he suddenly felt a strange tingling sensation on his face and neck. He couldn't help but scratch, and ended up picking off a large patch of mold on his neck, revealing pale but apparently healthy skin underneath. What What's going on? Dirt stared blankly at the scab-like substance in his hand. What medicine did you use on me? It actually worked so quickly. Then, he felt an intense itching all over his body, and he scratched again at the skin exposed outside his clothes, picking off the strange mold that had clung to it. As Dallin turned and looked at Reiner, his tone filled with obvious joy. The magic vaccine is indeed effective. But I injected him with 5 vaccines. I don't know which one had the therapeutic effect. Chapter 242 Elemental Devouring. Harvey, through the clear images recorded by the magic stone, could see that after receiving a dose of the magic vaccine, the dark green mold on the infected patient's bodies quickly dried and formed scabs, then naturally fell off the skin. This was definitely not a highly contagious disease like plague, cold, or schistosomiasis. Although the mold quickly faded after the medication, the high fever, hematemesis, and abdominal fluid accumulation persisted, and only gradually subsided after 3 injections of the magic vaccine within 24 hours. This showed that the toxicity of this strange plague was far more virulent than the common diseases of this era. Fortunately, the magic vaccine he had developed was unexpectedly effective, which gave Harvey a slight sense of relief. He called Egno, who had been on standby at the medical hospital, and said, "The plague and schistosomiasis vaccines are prepared in a ratio of 3 to 1. The drug dosage can be slightly increased. Anyway, there are no side effects. Also, those who have come into contact with the infected, regardless of whether they have symptoms or not, all need to be injected with a large dose of vaccine to play a preventive role." Chris, who came with him, asked in confusion, "Sir, since this is not the Black Death, nor schistosomiasis, nor the cold plague, then what exactly caused the infection? It can't be what the church said, that the necromancer's experiment was leaked." Harvey rolled his eyes and said angrily, "I am a necromancer myself. Have you seen any research projects related to toxins and plagues in my daily experiments? It's nonsense. Stereotype. Academic discrimination." Egno slipped a finger from his sleeves and poked Chris's back, prompting him to immediately understand and change the subject. "Sir, could we collect some blood and mold fragments shed from infected individuals and study them using a magic microscope? This could be valuable information for future vaccine development. If we can ensure the virus experiments are contained and follow safety procedures, it's feasible," Harvey warned, patiently. "The plague virus is different from a vaccine. I will not allow you to conduct clinical trials. Do you understand?" Jackdaw Town's epidemic prevention efforts proceeded smoothly, thanks to the Union's coordination and the pressure of the Northern Defense Force. Many initially skeptical nobles and local residents, after gradually showing symptoms of infection, finally accepted the Union's advice and dutifully arrived at the makeshift treatment station in the town square, queuing overnight to receive their vaccine injections. By the time the last batch of townspeople had completed their vaccinations, nearing dawn, the defense forces removed the temporary roadblocks that had sealed off the town, dismantled the treatment sheds erected in the small square, and quietly departed Jackdaw Town before daybreak. These well-trained mage followers arrived and departed so quickly. If they hadn't spoken, I'd have suspected they were all zombie puppets transformed and controlled by Mr. Kilthuzid. Jin, still standing by the second-floor window of the inn, couldn't help but sigh softly as he watched the defense forces silently march out of town. Melissa waved her hand wearily. "I've never seen a high-ranking spellcaster maintain such a large retinue. Could Mr. Kilthuzid be a direct descendant of some ancient wizarding family? It's very likely. I haven't studied the genealogical history of ancient wizarding families. I wonder which powerful wizarding families have emerged from St. Valen in the past. I envy these descendants of wizards born with countless magical heritages." Harvey hurried to the isolated underground laboratory of the Territory Hospital. Egno and Chris, fully equipped in protective suits, were in a laboratory cubicle enclosed by a transparent glass cover, operating a magic microscope and arguing heatedly. Seeing Harvey approach, they quickly picked up the alchemical microphones hanging on the wall and reported the situation through the protective glass. "Sir, this is bizarre. The blood and mold shed from the skin of these infected people actually contain the same magical microorganisms as the magical vaccine." Harvey was stunned. "What? Magical microorganisms in the plague virus?" Chris nodded with absolute certainty. "It's absolutely true. These plague microorganisms are also bizarre insectoids, and they possess the same phagocytic and assimilative abilities as the magical microorganisms. When I mixed them with blood drawn from healthy animals, I found that these strange microorganisms completely infect the ordinary microorganisms in normal blood in just seconds. Immediately, this drop of once bright red blood transformed into a horrible green mold. A plague virus with a connection to magic could never have been naturally produced. Ordinary bacteria and viruses could never be so horribly contagious and lethal. This strange plague is very likely man-made. Harvey frowned and made a grave judgment. Could it really be the work of a high-ranking necromancer who has concealed his identity? But among the spellcasters Harvey had acquainted with during his academy years, he had never heard of a high-ranking necromancer residing in the Principality of St. Valen. Furthermore, the vast majority of necromancers' research focuses on the utilization and transformation of death energy. Even the Undead Academy Harvey attended didn't offer courses in the less popular poison-based magic. Rumor has it that only within certain traditional necromancer families would a limited amount of knowledge of poison-based magic be passed down from generation to generation. For a necromancer to establish a magic laboratory in the capital of a secular kingdom is inherently unlikely, let alone to have the audacity to conduct magical experiments with a plague virus. This is simply fooling the Union Branch and church personnel in Jinhu City. There's definitely something fishy going on here. It's likely a fabricated accusation by the church or the nobility, intended to pin the blame on the city's spellcasters and, by extension, the Union, giving them an open opportunity to take action. With this in mind, Harvey immediately turned to his Dallin and instructed, "Send a message from me to Mr. Shield and Scorching Lord, informing them of the details of the plague outbreak in St. Valen's capital. No need to explain in detail, simply say I've discovered traces of human intervention in the plague virus. It could be caused by necromancy, or perhaps divine magic from the church." After Harvey finished his instructions, Egno leaned over and whispered through the glass partition, "Sir, we've discovered an interesting phenomenon during our observational experiments that might interest you." His words naturally piqued Harvey's curiosity. With the help of his personal guards, he donned his protective suit and entered the lab compartment. He approached the magic microscope and took a closer look. As he adjusted the observation values, the scene within the lens gradually became clearer, and Harvey could hardly believe his eyes. On a glass slide dripping with the blood of a plague-infected individual, countless sturdy insects with tentacles slowly swam through the pale red liquid. They were uniform in shape and size, but they differed noticeably from the magical microbes in the vaccine. Instead of being transparent, their bodies were a rich, dark green, giving them a strange and disgusting appearance. "This is the form of the microbes in the plague virus." Chris took a glass dropper and carefully mixed a drop of the clear liquid into the infected individual's blood, motioning for Harvey to re-observe. The scene within the magic microscope lens instantly changed dramatically. The magical microbes, brought by the drop of clear liquid, launched a swift attack the moment they came into contact with the virus. The virus microbes tried to fight back, spewing dark green pus from their bodies, but it seemed to have no effect on the microbes contained in the drop of liquid. They were quickly devoured and vanished into the pale red blood sample. "What kind of magical vaccine did you just mix into the blood sample?" Harvey asked, looking up at Chris. "My lord, this isn't just any vaccine or potion. This is a local specialty brought back by your friend from another dimension, Mr. Heart Demon, whenever he visits the territory, the demon web spirit. We've extracted an unknown substance from the spirit, rich in pure magic power. It was originally used to concoct liquid magic energy." Harvey was stunned. Can an extract from a spirit be used to cure the plague virus? How could a creature from another dimension have such a strange trait? Egno interrupted with some excitement. "My lord, more than that, this unknown substance in the spirit can even devour and assimilate the magical microorganisms originally used to cure diseases in the magic vaccine we concocted. Chris and I have tried various fusion methods and found that this thing devours everything. But the strange thing is, it simply devours, and the final assimilation product is actually the most common liquid magic energy. Why is this description so similar to a water purifier and a filtration device?" Harvey immediately asked the two to fetch more magic spirit extract and demonstrated the experimental process to him again in person. He found that it was just as they said. Once this extract was integrated into other magical substances, it would immediately transform them into pure magical energy without any other impurities. Even a high-quality fire elemental magic stone, after being soaked in the magic spirit extract for a few minutes, lost its unique red crystal color and was completely transformed into a charged magic stone of the same grade. The concentration and purity of the magical energy contained within it did not change at all, which was equivalent to completely equivalent conversion of energy properties. A thought suddenly flashed through Harvey's mind, and he couldn't help but mutter subconsciously. Isn't this just a reducing agent? And a magical version of a reducing agent. Chapter 243. The situation changes. 2 days later, Dirt Holden felt he had mostly recovered. To safely guide his group of magic apprentices to Jackdaw Town, he had secretly taken a large dose of the magical potion, a common substance sold on the underground black market in Golden Radiance City. It was a banned drug used to temporarily boost the caster's potential at the expense of their vital energy. After relying on the overdose to reach Jackdaw Town, Dirt, feeling relaxed, quickly suffered the onset of the plague, falling into a high fever and coma. Had Harvey not directly ordered him to undergo a test injection, he would likely have died that evening. However, the subsequent treatment arrangement struck Dirt as peculiar. Although the plague mold on his body had completely fallen off and the swelling in his abdomen had subsided rapidly, he was still forced into a separate room in the warehouse, where soldiers wrapped in heavy robes told him he needed another day of quarantine and observation. Every morning, noon, and evening, a mysterious healer, also completely covered in nothing but a tall, heavy-footed figure, would come to his room to treat him. Their method was also quite strange. Instead of applying a common compress or oral medication, they used a hollow metal probe to inject a certain liquid into his body. Dirt keenly noticed that the potion he injected on the first 2 days had the same effect. His fever quickly subsided, but his arm, where it had been injected, became extremely swollen and painful, so painful that he could barely lift it at night. However, the effect on the last day was noticeably different. Not only did the swelling and pain not cause any side effects, but he also felt that the magic power depletion caused by the banned potion had been significantly alleviated. It was like a river that had been nearly dry, but suddenly the floodgates upstream had been opened. A surging wave of magic flowed through the metal probe, piercing his skin. The potion flowed continuously into his body, nourishing his energy channels. Sir, the potion you gave me today isn't supposed to treat the plague, is it? After the last injection of the potion was completed after dinner, Dirt finally couldn't bear it anymore and asked the taciturn and mysterious doctor. As Dallin turned his head, his black robe masking only a pair of bright red eyes, he chuckled and said, "The difference in efficacy is obvious. It seems you've noticed. Haha, the potion for the plague only needs 2 days of use. The one you're using today is to help you repair your body and nourish your internal magical channels." Dirt breathed a sigh of relief. Although he had the introduction and arrangements of Mr. Fran McCollin of the Federation, it was truly thanks to the help and protection of this reclusive figure in Jackdaw Town that he and his group of mage apprentices had barely survived the expulsion of the church and the nobility, as well as the terrifying strange plague. "I don't know when I can personally thank you, Excellency, for your help. Without his generosity, even if our group insisted on reaching Jackdaw Town, I'm afraid we wouldn't be able to survive." He paused and continued, "Also, can you provide me with some paper and pen? I want to write a letter to Fran McCollin who introduced me here, to inform him of our current situation to prevent him from worrying too much." As Dallin said lightly, "Mr. McCollin already knows your current situation. He entrusted me to tell you to stay here with peace of mind and not to take the risk of returning to Jinhu City. Wait for the follow-up news. He will continue to contact you after he is busy these few days." Jinhu City. What's the situation in Jinhu City now? When my colleagues arranged for me to sneak out of the city, the church was leading the nobles' guards to surround us and the Alchemy Exploration Society. As Dallin shook his head slightly and whispered, "His Majesty the Grand Duke of St. Valen has joined forces with the Church of Radiance to publicly declare that the plague was caused by spellcasters. He has directly held the Federation responsible. He has decided to expel all spellcasters from St. Valen and arrest all magicians in the capital suspected of spreading the plague. Those of your Federation colleagues who remained in Golden Radiance City probably didn't make it out because the Continental Teleportation Array was preemptively destroyed by the Church. The Church and the nobles are about to reignite the 100 Years' War between spellcasters and secular forces." Harvey, who had been up all night, was completely distracted by the constant stream of messages from the spellcaster forum. He sat in his pajamas, his eyes red and swollen, before his magic computer, stunned by the constantly flashing messages on the forum. "Hand of the Elements, this is absurd. Based on a single trumped-up charge, the Grand Duke of St. Valen, wielding the Church's banner, openly expelled and persecuted spellcasters from his own land? What are the results of the investigation? What about the evidence collection process? Who is the suspect? They can't produce anything, So why are they putting all the blame on the spellcaster man in the mirror? The Alchemy Exploration Society is also involved. These foolish and greedy secular nobles, when they needed help from the alchemists, they wouldn't be like this now. Frost Giant. So, this was a trap set for the Federation by the Church and the nobles of St. Valen? A premeditated attempt to target domestic spellcasters? What? Do they really want to reignite the human civil war? Magic Shield. The Federation's independent combat operation in the Evil Moon Mountains is currently at a critical juncture. 2 of the 3 chiefs have already gone to Black Rock City to take charge of the situation. Currently, only Lord Seraph remains in a lair, but he is now in a deep meditation stage, and I'm afraid he won't be able to spare his time to deal with this emergency. The Church and the nobles really know how to pick a time to strike. Astrologer. The plague in St. Valen's capital has spread widely. The so-called healing potions released by the Church are simply not enough to treat the infected civilians in Golden Radiant City and the surrounding areas. A large number of those infected, or those fearing infection, have begun fleeing the capital, migrating to other regions and kingdoms. It's said that Deus has closed its borders and dispatched spellcasters to forcefully expel those refugees who attempt to enter Deus. Forest Heart. This is a wise decision. If these infected civilians are allowed to enter freely, the plague will quickly spread to the surrounding kingdoms. Even if spellcasters and alchemists develop effective remedies, it won't be enough to save so many ordinary people. The death toll will be even greater than during the demon invasion. Mindhunter. But wouldn't that make the ordinary people, seeking a glimmer of hope, hate and fear the spellcasters even more? Aren't they already firmly convinced that the plague that brings them disaster and death is caused by these heinous wizards? Haha, how ironic and tragic. Harvey couldn't help but cover his face and lamented Mr. Inner Demon's blunt remarks. You're not human, why are you stirring up trouble here? You're making such irresponsible remarks. It's easy to talk without feeling any pain. Everyone on the forum knew full well that his words were true. The Church used healing potions to win over the people, and the nobles used secular authority to publicly support their actions. They had firmly controlled public opinion and the hearts of the people. Spellcasters were afraid that they would repeat the same mistakes of the past, and the reputation and trust they had worked so hard to build in the mortal world would soon be wiped out. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244 Territory News. Dirt had assumed that the reclusive spellcaster of Jackdaw Town might reside in a mage's tower nestled in the desolate mountains outside town, or perhaps even use a deep cavern as a secret laboratory. Unexpectedly, upon completing their quarantine treatment, they were transported inside a massive metal beast, then jolted across the towering Jackdaw Ridge to a private frontier estate in the northern wastes. After settling the young mage apprentice in an elegant building, Dirt was led by a squad of soldiers directly to the castle grounds and into the Lord's study. Inside the luxuriously decorated, brightly lit study, a dark-haired man of his age, a smile on his face, sat in a large, reclining chair behind a desk, his head tilted to listen to a report from his personal guards. This is the Lord of the Northern Frontier Territory, His Excellency Harvey Floyd, and a registered spellcaster of the Union. Dirt's eyes widened, his voice suddenly familiar, emanating from a towering metal figure within the study. The person who had been treating him daily for the past few days, was actually this very alchemical prosthesis. The spellcaster who had been protecting and treating them was also a noble lord with a vast fiefdom. Dirt's mind went blank, unsure whether to greet him with ancient wizard etiquette or the customary protocol for spellcasters meeting nobles. No problem, I don't mind conventional formalities, Harvey said, chuckling softly at the other's awkward and fearful demeanor. Forgive my impoliteness, Your Excellency. Harvey casually gestured to the soft sofa beside him, motioning for Dirt to sit down and speak. Are you Flame, Mr. Verholden's nephew? You do look very similar, and that fiery red hair is truly striking. Dirt's mouth twitched, sensing a strange tone in the mage lord's voice. They were clearly of similar age, yet why did he treat him more like a caring elder? Verholden is my uncle, though we haven't seen each other in years, ever since I took up my position at the St. Valen Union branch. Harvey hummed, then changed the subject and asked in a deep voice, please give me a detailed and exact account of what happened in the St. Valen capital. Welcome to the Frontier Territory, In the guesthouse's dining room, an alchemist apprentice looked at the new mage apprentices and, with a broad smile, seated them at the table. Just call me Ryan. If the Lord hadn't said I'm close in age and could be closer, Mr. Chris wouldn't have been so kind as to give me half a day off. I have so much work to do in the alchemy lab. The alchemist apprentice introduced himself as the waiter continued to bring piping hot food. Taryn and Lilith exchanged a glance before cautiously picking up their knives and forks. Seeing the two seniors begin their meal, the younger apprentices followed suit, picking up their cutlery and digging into the food they'd been salivating over. Smells so good. What kind of poultry is this? The skin is so crispy and the inside is so tender. Oh my god, I've never eaten such a delicious snack. It's filled with honey and jam. Is this fruit wine? Senior Lilith, aren't we not allowed to drink alcohol? Ryan said with a smile. It doesn't matter. This kind of fruit wine tastes very mild and won't intoxicate you. You've been traveling all the way and you need to drink a little to relax. While the other party was talking, Taryn politely put down his knife and fork. Ryan, I heard you mention alchemy. Is it possible that in addition to the magic laboratory for spellcasters, there is also a separate alchemy laboratory in the Pioneer territory? Of course, alchemy and magic laboratories are two completely different independent departments. The experiments and work tasks that need to be carried out on a daily basis are also very different. For example, Ryan pointed to himself with some pride. I am responsible for the research and development of civilian products and independently lead an alchemy team. Lilith asked doubtfully, civilian use? Product development? Isn't alchemy for the service of nobles and spellcasters? I remember that the laws of the Southern Territory stipulate that alchemical products with magical properties cannot be used on ordinary people. Taryn frowned and quickly kicked Lilith under the table. Ryan laughed nonchalantly. What does that matter? This is the Northern Wasteland. The pioneering territories outside the border only follow the laws and regulations established by the Lord, and everything is based on the Lord's will. He stood up and brought a plate of cream cake in front of him to a group of children who couldn't reach it. After turning around and sitting down, he said in a gentle tone, moreover, alchemy itself is not designed to serve a certain class. The Lord himself said that the application of alchemy is very wide, and we should not limit ourselves. This will restrict our development and improvement. Taryn nodded in agreement, without dwelling on this somewhat sensitive topic, and asked instead, such a sumptuous meal must cost a lot. We have used up all the money we have on the way here. No. Both the food and the house you're staying in are courtesy of the Lord. I don't have to spend any money on them, and of course, you don't have to pay anything either. Ryan couldn't help but laugh, but then felt a bit rude and quickly said, I'm just enjoying the food with you guys. With my salary, I don't have the opportunity to enjoy such a sumptuous meal every day. Lilith almost spit out the hot tea she had just taken a sip of. What? Apprentices get paid. After lunch, the alchemist apprentice Ryan reluctantly said goodbye to his new friends. Taryn and Lilith returned to their comfortable room on the second floor of the guest house, closed the door, and discussed things with concern. Mr. Dirt has been summoned by the Lord and hasn't returned yet. We're housed in this building, unable to leave freely. Look at those guards at the door, they must be sent by the Lord to monitor and control us. Lilith pondered for a moment, then spoke. Are you worried that the nobles here will betray us and hand us over to the church? Taryn frowned and shook his head, his own thoughts conflicting. From the time we entered the territory until we arrived here, we haven't seen any churches or church personnel. I doubt the church has any influence here. After all, this is the Northern Wastes. The two were talking quietly when the door suddenly opened and Dirt walked in, a look of joy on his face. Mr. Dirt, the young mage apprentice immediately found his support. Is everyone okay? I heard from the soldiers downstairs that you've had lunch already, Dirt asked gently. Lilith nodded. Well, have you gone to meet the Lord? What should we do next? That Lord? Are you willing to take us in and shelter us? Of course. Dirt sat down on the soft sofa with a relaxed look and said with a smile, we don't need to hide anymore. From today on, this will be our home for a long time to come. I will serve the Lord, and at the same time, you will join the territory like me and continue to learn magic. Chapter 245, Thank You Gift from Netizens. Harvey plunged into the castle's basement laboratory early in the morning and began testing the restorative properties of the demonic spirit extract using a variety of magical materials. Harvey envisioned this alien life extract, accidentally discovered by Egno and Chris during vaccine experiments, as something more than just a plague purifier. This completely equivalent energy conversion could be applied to a wide range of magical experiments, offering unexpected benefits. Harvey's first thought was the magic restoration effect. Spellcasters of different factions often need to consider the active times of different types of magic when drawing magic from the weave through guided meditation. For example, Harvey, following the traditional meditation method taught at the School of the Undead, determined that the optimal time to draw magic rich in death energy was around midnight, when the weave was most active. Elementalists, on the other hand, typically meditate during the day. As long as the sun remains up, the 4 elemental elements remain active within the weave. The pure magic energy arcane spellcasters need to draw upon is quite specific. Whenever they engage in guided meditation, the magic energy they draw from the magic weave must be purified by their own magic patterns before it can be used. Sir, besides purifying the plague, does this thing really have other uses? Asked Alan, on duty in the laboratory as usual, assisting Harvey with his experiments. It's incredibly useful. If this extract truly can produce a reduction reaction on all magical substances, then we won't have to worry about the production of liquid magic energy anymore. Although countless swarms of energy-absorbing beetles have been discovered in the underground caverns, they can't be directly harvested for energy. They must undergo catalytic maturation, or sorting, and quality selection. Finally, the qualified fractions are fed into an energy device modified from the demonic blood-exchanging apparatus for repeated purification and conversion. Each kilogram of high-quality beetle ore can be purified into less than 2 cans of liquid mana in the energy conversion equipment. A magically powered alchemical vehicle like the magical scooter would consume these 2 cans of mana simply by traveling 100 kilometers at high speed around the territory. Not to mention large-scale power equipment in vehicles like the magical icebreaker and the living shield machine, whose liquid mana consumption per operation is enough to make Harvey feel a sharp pain. If this extract can be used for mana purification, then all subsequent beetle ore production can skip the many tedious steps. There's no need to wait for catalytic maturation, and there's no need to worry about elemental impurities. All can be mixed together and purified uniformly using reducing agents. The two discussed and conducted experiments methodically until the central magic computer in the laboratory began to beep frequently, a sign that someone was contacting Harvey privately on the forum. I guess it's another matter of the St. Valen capital plague and the Federation. Harvey removed his protective mask and sat down in front of the magic computer. Son of Flame, Kilthuzid, my dear friend. I just finished a new round of combat missions, and now I have the chance to contact you. If that shield guy hadn't left me a message, I wouldn't have known you did me such a big favor. Harvey was stunned for a moment, and just as he was about to type a humble reply, another long message came crashing down from the other end. Son of Flame, my nephew, Dirt. Haha, you should recognize that guy right away. If you hadn't protected him, he'd probably be dead. Damn it, I told him a long time ago that a civilian job in the Union had no future. The demonic battlefields of the demonic Moon Mountains are the perfect place to display his talents. Harvey's mouth twitched, and he couldn't help but grumble inwardly, with your nephew's physique, even weaker than mine, if he really went to the demonic Moon Mountains, I'm afraid you'd be receiving a war-dead pension right away. Kilthuzid, don't say that. I owed it all to you, Son of Flame, for helping me in LAM. I'll always remember that favor. Son of Flame, no, no, no. The principle of equivalent exchange. You've already paid the price. Forgotten? Your electromagnetic magic has been invaluable during these battles. So, how can I thank you this time? Is there anything I can help you with? How about sending you a few captive demon spellcasters? They'll be perfect experimental material. A few? Are demon spellcasters just some sheep you can easily catch on a hillside? What I need most right now is money. I'm desperately short of it. Ever since the shipyard and the magic car works went into production, Harvey has begun sourcing large quantities of high-quality iron ore and expensive finished iron ingots from the southern border. The mines in his own territory simply can't supply such a large amount of steel manufacturing. But Mr. Son of Flame is just a high-level spellcaster, alone. Even if he sold his own magic tower, he wouldn't be able to raise the huge amount of money Harvey needs. Kilthuzid, forget about demon captives, the transportation costs are even higher than the actual living ones. There are a ton of fell orcs in the northern wastes, so I have no shortage of living experimental material. Is there anything else of interest? Any special artifacts or oddities from the demons? Fell Holden sat cross-legged in the camp, the small demonic brain device resting on his knees. He read the text message and scratched his head. Hush! Where's the special artifact? Those demon priests aren't good at using artifacts. They prefer to arbitrarily modify their bodies, transforming themselves into something neither human nor ghost. At this thought, he suddenly slapped his thigh, his memory flashing back to the thrilling life-or-death encounter from a while ago. The demon ascendant who had transplanted two strange black hands to him wore a strange golden crown on his head, embedded directly into his flesh. It looked extremely strange and terrifying. Closing his eyes, he searched through his storage ring for a while before finally finding the strangely shaped golden crown. Fel quickly pulled it out and examined it. It's not the usual gold, silver, copper, or iron. The casting seems even worse than that of a questing society apprentice. It's as ugly as a child's clay. But it's a rare and unique toy. I'll give it to Mr. Kilthuzid as a plaything. With that, he pulled out a large pile of materials for a makeshift teleportation array and, squatting inside the tent, began busily painting. The Leline teleportation array emitted a soft humming sound. After a flash of reddish light, a mass appeared in the center of the array, seemingly wrapped haphazardly in half a torn sheet. Are all gifts from Mr. Son of Fire so casual? As Dallin stepped forward, picked up the sheet wrapping, and quickly tore it open. He then froze in his tracks, motionless. What's wrong? Is this thing dangerous? Harvey asked immediately. Asterin's metal joint seemed to tremble slightly, and it took more than 10 seconds for him to recover. The crimson soul fire in his eyes seemed to burn brighter than usual. My lord, this is the wizard's crown worn by the ruler of the Kingdom of Eternal Night, the Kingdom of Eternal Night. Chapter 246 Dragon Chaser. Harvey sat on the sofa, listening to Arslan slowly recount ancient tales of the Kingdom of Eternal Night. Ever since he transformed the hybrids from the amber crystal into alchemical beings, he had rarely spoken of his distant past. Had it not been for this unexpected gift from an online friend in the Evil Moon Mountains, Harvey would have been unlikely to hear from Arslan the secret history buried in the long river of time. 1,000 years of dragon rule. Over 300 years of the Dragon Wars, humanity established 7 wizarding kingdoms, forming alliances with elves, dwarves, demons, and orcs to fight dragon rule and enslavement. Over 100 years ago, the War of Betrayal between humans and demons erupted, officially establishing the Spellcasters' Union and catapulting it onto the historical stage. Mediated by the secular nobility, wizards and the church signed a peace treaty to jointly resist alien invasions. This historical knowledge, which Harvey had memorized so thoroughly during his initial magical studies, had, at certain crucial points, developed hidden branches. As early as the Dragon War, the vast wizarding family of Arslan left the human kingdoms of the south and migrated to the north, crossing the towering God's Spine Mountains and the vast wasteland to establish a wizard kingdom called the City of Eternal Night. The long period originally referred to as the Dragon War in the books was, for some unknown reason, called the Glorious War in this kingdom founded by ancient wizards. I remember when you were just rescued, you asked me. The Holy Blood Knights, is it the armed army of the Kingdom of Eternal Night? Or is it the retinue of some ancient legendary spellcaster? As Dallin smiled bitterly and muttered, I was distracted at that time and asked casually. I didn't expect you to still remember it now. He paused, looking at the strange crown shining with golden luster in his hand, and said in a deep voice, the Holy Blood Knights are not a wizard's retinue army at all, but a wizard regiment composed entirely of wizards. Haha, according to the current saying, the Kingdom of Eternal Night has no research-type spellcasters at all of them are combat mages. Harvey was a little surprised and said, then the King of the Kingdom of Eternal Night is also a legendary combat spellcaster? This is really rare, at least in the 100 years since the founding of the Federation. Harvey only knew that Gallagher, one of the current 3 chiefs, was a legendary spellcaster who was promoted from a combat mage. Before that, the 7 major wizard kingdoms had never had a similar legendary rank. As Dallin nodded and chuckled, yes, the king is indeed a legendary spellcaster, but in the Kingdom of Eternal Night, we don't use legend as a title of rank. Powerful wizards like the King of Eternal Night are respected as dragon chasers. Dragon chasers? Did all high-level wizards at that time need to complete their promotion through battles with dragons? Isn't that too horrifying? Harvey scratched his chin, saying that it was really hard to imagine. I'm not sure about the details. After all, I was just a newly promoted mid-level wizard at that time. I was ostracized because of my mixed race identity and had no access to the secret knowledge related to high-level promotions. Asdalin pondered for a moment and continued, "Sir, do you still remember the article on the basic theoretical research of modern magic included in the Forum Encyclopedia? The author is Julian Aziz." Harvey slapped his forehead. "How could I not remember? It was from that article of his that I gained the knowledge inspiration for creative spells. A junior teacher at the Orlando School of Magic is simply a bare genius in magic theory," Asdalin said dimly. "I also read that theoretical document over and over again at that time, and was touched by some of the viewpoints in it. The wizard's magic learning comes from the imitation of ancient magical creatures. In the ancient wizard kingdom where there were no research-based spellcasters, where did we learn those powerful combat techniques? I think this is why high-level promotions must be in battle, and those who successfully advance are called dragon chasers, chasing ancient dragons, and also chasing the magical knowledge that came from them." Harvey nodded thoughtfully, then pointed at the golden crown held by Arslan and asked curiously, "So, high-ranking wizards who have earned the title of Dragon Chaser can forge a glorious crown to wear atop their heads, symbolizing the nobility of their rank." Ancient wizards were far more sophisticated in their rituals than modern spellcasters, though the craftsmanship and aesthetics of this casting were slightly lacking. Arslan chuckled and teased, "Don't you think this golden crown looks a bit ugly? Even an apprentice at the Jackdaw Town blacksmith shop could craft a more exquisite crown." He stood up and placed the metal crown on a laboratory table equipped with a magnifying lens and a magic stone for illumination, inviting Harvey to come closer and examine its structure. "You see, this golden crown is made of an extremely rare magical metal, which we call abyss dark gold. To obtain this metal material, the sea people need to dive into the 10,000-meter deep abyss of the far North Sea to collect it. Hundreds of kilograms of raw ore are needed to refine the material for casting such a small crown. Moreover, ordinary furnaces and flame temperatures are simply unable to metallize this dark metal. It requires several high-level wizards who are proficient in fire magic to jointly drive the ancient fire amplification array to barely cast it into shape. It is not easy to make it into the shape in front of us." Harvey observed carefully through the magnifying lens and found that there were obvious traces of fire magic burning on the surface of the golden crown, but the effect on the metal itself was very slight. It seemed that after a long period of scorching flames, it could only cause a slight change in shape. The crown and the metal bring the same honor and significance, but to expend so much manpower and resources to create this thing, I think it's simply not worth it. "Not at all, sir. This is the Dragon Chaser's crown. How can it be merely decorative?" Asdalin, smiling, took the golden crown and slowly placed it upon his metal head, before Harvey's astonishment. The next second, he vanished into thin air. A violent spatial fluctuation erupted near the nearby wall, and Asdalin reappeared there. "This is a short-distance teleportation device? That's not right. Alchemical beings can't manipulate magic to cast spells. How did you do it?" Harvey was stunned, his mouth agape. Alchemical beings lack magic patterns, spiritual anchors, and seas of consciousness, so they naturally can condense and construct magic models within the magic network. This is why Harvey equipped Asdalin and Reiner with energy beam weapons for self-defense. Asdalin removed the crown from his head and explained with a smile, "Sir, this is no ordinary magic device. It's the Dragon Chaser's soul device. As long as you possess a soul, you can manipulate it at will." Chapter 247 Soul Magical Instrument. A soul artifact? The Dragon Chaser's golden crown? Is it a teleportation artifact that can be controlled by the soul? Harvey reached out to take the golden crown from Arslan and examined it carefully again. Among his closest friends on the Spellcaster Forum, the two Mr. Quinns, codenamed Mirror Men, were master artifact forgers. The legendary artifact known as the Storm Furnace, used by Union Chief Sarath, was crafted by these two brothers from an ancient wizard's relic. It was a gift from the alchemy quest to congratulate the Scorching Lord on his ascension to legendary status. Harvey learned a great deal about alchemical artifact forging from them during their daily discussions on the forum. Whether it was amplifying, energy storing, or auxiliary artifacts, he knew some of the techniques involved. But he had never heard of such a thing as a soul artifact. After all, any artifact required an inscription of spells that absorbed or released magic power, and the artifact's effects were achieved through a connection with the caster's own magic power. In other words, if the soul can be considered a form of energy, then it's not impossible to use it to power magical instruments. Since Asdalin had already worn and tested it beforehand, Harvey felt relieved. He carefully placed the dragon chaser's crown on his head and tried to channel his own magic power into it. He found that the crown, as expected, had no effect on the magic power. No wonder Mr. Son of Fire thinks this is just a decorative item made of rare metal. Following Professor Asdalan's method, Harvey calmed his mind and drew a trace of mental energy from his sea of consciousness. He connected it closely with his own spiritual anchor and, through guided meditation, channeled the vast spiritual power from the spiritual anchor into the dragon chaser's crown. Almost instantly, the space in Harvey's underground laboratory suddenly became filled with countless straight, yet chaotically distributed, lines. These lines varied in thickness, and at the intersection of each line was a slightly twisted hole. These were the special folding coordinates Asdalan had mentioned. Harvey remained motionless, observing for a moment, keenly noticing an anomaly and a difference. According to Asdalan's description, after donning the golden crown and infusing it with soul energy, one could visualize special folding coordinates within the surrounding area, though these typically existed in only a few, allowing for short-distance teleportation. However, the special coordinates and folding lines that appeared before Harvey's eyes were densely packed, like squares on a chessboard, completely different from what Asdalan had described. Perhaps the strength of each person's soul energy varies. After all, Asdalan had undergone soul transfer experiments, and perhaps his soul suffered minor damage during the transformation. Harvey extended a finger and gently touched the nearest coordinate point. This narrow, cross-shaped special hole, parallel to the laboratory's door, extended vertically upward, seemingly piercing the laboratory's ceiling to reach other floors of the castle. After a slight spatial distortion, Harvey's body vanished from the lab. Asdalan looked around and found he hadn't appeared anywhere. This clearly didn't match the short-range teleportation characteristics of the magical instrument. Oh no. Could it be that the magical instrument has been through so much time, suffering some unnoticed damage, causing the master's instantaneous teleportation to go awry? Asdalan immediately rushed to the magic brain instrument, hoping to quickly log into the spellcaster forum. There were no high-level magicians skilled in arcane energy casting in the territory, so the fastest rescuers could only be the two spellcasters left in Jackdaw Town. Wait. I'm fine. Don't disturb the other forum members. A gentle voice suddenly appeared behind Asdalan. Harvey had silently teleported back without anyone noticing. My lord. I thought you were accidentally sucked into a special rift during the teleportation. I was terrified. Harvey smiled, removing the golden crown from his head and shaking his head, explaining, I don't know why, but this magical device doesn't seem to work the way you described for short-distance teleportation. He had simply touched and connected to the special fold coordinate closest to his body, and within a second, he was instantly transported to his bedroom on the top floor of the castle. Even vertically, the distance between the two locations was about 20 or 30 meters. Harvey had only seen this kind of teleportation effect in the LA Sky Domain Magic Tower, and it required a fixed-structure teleportation array with a steady input of vast magical power. Harvey handed the crown back to Asdalan and suggested, show me again. Try to touch the special coordinate farthest from your body. I want to see your maximum teleportation distance. Asdalan's crimson eyes shrank, and he muttered, Sir, are you kidding? The soul energy of an average spellcaster can only sustain a single, one-way teleportation within a short period of time. If I try again, I'm afraid my soul will be directly damaged. Huh? Harvey was stunned. He had just teleported back and forth twice, and hadn't felt anything special at all. The experience was like entering the magic web through meditation, with only a slight dizziness during the moment of teleportation. Other than that, no discomfort. But since Asdalan, who knew the dragon chaser's crown well, had said so, Harvey naturally didn't dare let anyone else try it rashly. Instead, he collaborated with him to test the teleportation frequency and distance. He logged back into the spellcaster forum and found Mr. Son of Flame, who was still surfing online, to inquire about the details of how he had acquired this demonic trophy. Flame Son, that's how the battle went. Wasn't it incredibly dangerous and thrilling? Haha, for a research spellcaster like you, it's best not to encounter such a crisis even once in your lifetime, or you could actually lose your life. Harvey rolled his eyes speechlessly. Mr. Flameson's passion for battle was truly rare among research spellcasters. From his description of the battle scenes, one could sense his suddenly passionate enthusiasm. Kilthuzid. So, That high-ranking demon priest named the Ascended you encountered possessed a very strange teleportation ability, and used this ability to repeatedly shift positions over short distances and launch sneak attacks against you in a short period of time. Flameson, yes, his methods were indeed bizarre, but all his fancy magic couldn't withstand a single headshot from the Lance of Oblivion. Haha, this energy weapon you're responsible for crafting is truly amazing. When you have some free time, could you consider customizing one for me? I want one with greater power and a longer range. How about I build you an annihilation cannon? You can carry it on your shoulders, fly up into the sky, and fire directly at the demon fortress. Harvey couldn't help but grumble to himself. Even if these elemental blasters changed their majors, they still couldn't escape their lifelong love of high-yield weapons. If what Mr. Son of Fire said was true, then even a high-level demon priest who was an ascended one could only achieve a maximum of 5 special teleportations within a small range when controlling the soul artifact. Harvey couldn't help but imagine that if he connected to the special coordinates farthest from his position that he had just seen while wearing the golden crown, how far could he achieve instant teleportation? He wouldn't be sent directly to the depths of the northern wasteland in one wave. Chapter 248 Rescue Plan. A week later, a second wave of St. Varen plague refugees arrived at the border, pouring into the small border town of Jackdaw. Despite the fact that Earl Fagin, Lord of Grizzle Castle, had sealed the city's gates and strictly prohibited anyone from entering his fiefdom, sporadic cases of the plague continued to emerge uncontrollably, spreading rapidly within just 2 or 3 days. Unable to find refuge in Grizzle Castle, many refugees flocked to the surrounding villages and towns, seeking shelter, food, and water. The plague also broke out among these people, and it was even more severe than before. Almost half of them developed the disease en route, while a few healthy adults only developed abdominal swelling and moldy skin after arriving at the border. This meant that even without direct contact with the plague, it was possible to contract this strange disease indirectly, though the incubation period was slightly longer. At the same time, Harvey received a message from Mr. Fwellen on the forum, as well as a letter from the Dragonstone Merchant Guild's branch station in St. Varen. After reading the 2 letters, he couldn't help but frown and remain silent. A strange plague was spreading rapidly in Golden Glory City, the capital of St. Valen. The church, using scarce treatments to maintain tight control over the city's nobles and wealthy merchants, was simultaneously claiming that this was a conspiracy by certain evil spellcasters, condoned and protected by the Union. For safety reasons, the Dragonstone Merchant Guild had decided to suspend its long-standing bulk supply sales and shipments with Harvey, reconsidering cooperation once the plague was under control. Meanwhile, the Union headquarters in LA, embroiled in endless internal disputes due to the temporary absence of the 3 legendary chiefs, had no effective recourse other than engaging in several pointless verbal battles with the church at the Alliance Council. Compared to using new magical tools to reap lucrative war profits on the demonic battlefields of the Evil Moon Mountains, the ordinary spellcasters expelled and persecuted within St. Valen are probably not even on their radar right now, not to mention the ordinary civilians tragically infected and killed in this plague conspiracy. Politicians with magic are still politicians, compared to the foolish and greedy secular nobles, they are merely more powerful and transcendental. However, Harvey keenly sensed a key point in this multifaceted conspiracy that could benefit him. Rather than hiding in the northern wilderness, remaining neutral and aloof, waiting for the church and the nobles to persecute and expel the spellcasters in St. Valen, then using faith and drugs to convert the remaining survivors into devout believers hostile to spellcasters, it would be better to seize the opportunity and intervene, taking in the infected refugees fleeing to the northern border and replenishing his own frontier territory, which was already desperately short of population and labor. Since the Church and the Federation had already semi-publicly fallen out, once they withdrew and stabilized the situation in St. Valen, they would undoubtedly continue their investigation and targeting him. The Church investigation team that was ambushed and killed by Forum member astrologer was proof of this. However, simply waiting at the border for infected refugees to arrive and then sheltering and treating them would likely be ineffective. The outbreak cycle was too short, and most innocent people would suffer heavy casualties in this clearly man-made disaster. Few would survive and persevere to reach the border. Every death in the working population would pain Harvey, so he had to avoid such occurrences as much as possible and do his utmost to preserve a sufficient population reserve for the future of the territory. What? You want to go to Jackdaw Town in person? No. I absolutely disagree. Even if we had a cure for the plague, I wouldn't recommend risking your life. The work of sheltering and treating the refugees can be handled by our defense forces. They already have experience, and we have Mr. Pierce and Mr. Asdalen overseeing it. That's right. Chris and I can lead the doctors from the hospital and head directly to Jackdaw Town to set up a temporary plague treatment center. The vaccine we've prepared is enough to treat over 5,000 infected patients. Everyone gathered in the conference hall of the territorial castle, surrounding Harvey and offering their advice. The core idea and unifying demand was that Harvey, as the Lord, couldn't personally go to Jackdaw Town to preside over the situation. After all, if tens of thousands of refugees rioted, the defense force of just over 1,000, even with indiscriminate shooting, wouldn't be able to guarantee the Lord's safety. Harvey was well aware of his limited military management skills. Once he left his northern base, this frontier territory, home to nearly 10,000 people, would become a ruthless place. He could never be sure what kind of trouble the fell orc tribes, which frequently harassed him, might bring. After all, autumn was approaching, and the harsh winter months, when they would raid south, were not far off. Ultimately, rather than hosting refugees, he preferred to avoid any potential conflicts in his own base camp. Ultimately, Harvey was persuaded to remain alone in the frontier territory. But he needed to devise a comprehensive action plan. Having lived in Jackdaw Town for over 6 months since graduating from the Undead Academy, Harvey had a good understanding of the local situation. He had Pierce spread out paper and began personally drawing a simple map on the long table in the conference hall. Jackdaw Town is surrounded by mountains on both sides, and there is only one official road in and out of the town. However, there are many forest paths along the river beach, and many refugees will also flee from this direction. After all, this is the only clean water source along the way. Harvey took a black charcoal pencil and drew 2 thick lines representing checkpoints. Therefore, you need to complete 2 tasks. The first is to set up epidemic prevention checkpoints on the main road leading to the town. The second is to closely monitor the refugees arriving sporadically from the river beach, and try to guide them to the reception area we set up outside the town. Don't let them flood into the town and cause chaos. Pierce frowned slightly, took the charcoal pencil handed to him by Harvey, and drew scattered circles around the town, representing the small villages near Jackdaw Town. Sir, what should we do if they bypass the checkpoints we set up and scatter to attack the surrounding villages? News of the plague spreading through the capital had already reached Grizzle Castle. The minor nobles who had been lingering in Jackdaw Town for the autumn hunt had already fled back to their respective fiefdoms. Even Earl Figan's tax collector, stationed in the town, had quietly returned to Grizzle Castle at night with his own patrols and militia. If the refugees rioted due to food shortages and launched a rampage, attacking and pillaging the surrounding villages and towns, this small frontier region would likely lack any official armed forces to suppress or resist, save for the private soldiers and knights maintained by the nobles in their fiefdoms. Harvey opened his palm and slapped a location of the warehouse at the foot of Jackdaw Ridge. This will be the location where we set up a refugee shelter. Send all the special operations officers with bloodline talents in the Northern Army to the surrounding villages and towns, and tell the refugees and local villagers wandering around the area that we have special potions, and guide them to come for treatment. As for the refugees who have arrived at the shelter, promise them that they can get free food and shelter if they join the Pioneer Territory, and then escort them back in batches of 500 people per team. Reiner leaned over and whispered, "What if they don't want to join us?" Harvey narrowed his eyes and said dimly, "They should have heard how much it costs to buy the divine grace potion provided by the church. Although we are not as shameless as those charlatans, we will not provide free lunch either." Chapter 249 Receiving Refugees. Egno hurriedly handed over a list of potions and reported to Harvey, "Sir, the hospital has urgently produced a batch of vaccines, approximately 5,000 doses of preventative vaccine and 3,000 doses of therapeutic potion. The preventative vaccine is for healthy individuals who haven't been infected yet, or those in the incubation period, while the therapeutic potion is for those already experiencing severe symptoms. Severely infected individuals require multiple, high-dose injections of magical potions. Ordinary people lack the same natural affinity for magic as spellcasters, resulting in relatively severe side effects, vomiting, diarrhea, and days-long weakness and low-grade fever. Even if they volunteered to join the frontier territory, they wouldn't be able to drag themselves across Jackdaw Ridge to the northern wastes. Therefore, Harvey had to prearrange the war beasts, who roamed the valley outposts and the territory, transporting military supplies, as well as the numerous alchemical camels, to Jackdaw Town. The preparation and production of vaccines and medicines cannot stop. We are now competing with the church for people. When they start distributing medicines to civilians in large quantities, the refugees will inevitably slow down their urge to flee their homes, and the number of people we can win over will be greatly reduced. Harvey took a deep breath and gave Pierce a formal order. For this operation, I need you to lead 1,000 defense soldiers and 500 Northern Army soldiers to receive and guide the refugees. The first priority is to ensure the personal safety of our non-combatants, and the second is to maintain order and stability in the shelter. Unless it is absolutely necessary, do not shoot at civilians. As Dallin said quietly, there are still several low-level priests and priests in the church branch in Jackdaw Town. Although they are currently under the control and surveillance of the Federation, the news of our actions will soon leak to the royal capital. I am afraid that the army of the church and the nobles will pounce on us before long. Harvey, clutching a charcoal pencil, gently drew a black cross on the map representing the Jackdaw Town Church. Then expel them. The Jackdaw Town Church and the Lord of Grizzly Castle have done nothing to address this plague, allowing the people to suffer and become displaced. As the Lord of the neighboring fiefdom, I declare that I will temporarily assume all administrative management of Jackdaw Town. As Pierce and his officers entered the refugee shelter, he couldn't help but twitch his nose slightly and frowned. For the vampires, with their exceptionally keen sense of smell, the odor was unbearably nauseating. Everywhere were the dying and agonizing victims of the plague, most of them with stomachs swollen like pregnant women in labor. The skin exposed outside their clothes was covered in a gruesome dark green mold. Scratching would cause the edges of the mold to ooze the same dark green pus and blood, attracting flies and mosquitoes. But they were too weak to even drive them away, so they could only let the maggots fly and lick at their bodies. Pierce couldn't help but recall his own human past. Whenever the fell orcs invaded in winter, countless civilians from the surrounding villages and towns were forced to flee to Grizzle Keep for refuge. Lacking adequate warm clothing and shelter, many huddled in shacks in the city's slums, succumbing to an incurable cold plague and vomiting thick black blood. Such a bleak and tragic scene shone so vividly on the present moment. The actions of the church and the nobles showed a complete disregard for human life. First, carry those with a more severe infection to the sheds. Even after receiving medication, they need to recuperate indoors in a sheltered area. His Northern Army soldiers were much tougher than the less combat-savvy defenders. Having witnessed the brutal and bloody battlefields of the river valley outposts and the swamp mines against the fell orcs and demons, they felt no fear for the miserable plague victims before them. Before arriving, they had all been carefully monitored and given large doses of the vaccine. Soldiers rushed forward, carrying the immobilized patients on their backs and heading for the makeshift sheds. When they encountered patients bleeding profusely from infected sores, they expertly pulled out the military's standard hemostatic bandages and applied a simple bandage. Dozens of doctors in white robes busily moved in and out of the sheds, carrying boxes of medicine and administering injections to the critically ill and dying infected. Pierce easily stepped onto a platform that had been set up in advance and picked up the alchemical loudspeaker handed to him by the soldier. Listen up everyone, Lord Harvey of the Northern Frontier has developed a special medicine that can cure the plague. As long as you are willing to join his territory and serve him, you can get treatment for free, without any charge. These words caused a commotion among the people gathered at the shelter. An infected person who had just been sick with the epidemic moved to the side of the platform with difficulty, opened his mouth and asked in a hoarse voice, "Lord, are you really willing to provide medicine for free? As long as we become his subjects." Another civilian who obviously did not seem to be infected with the disease came over and asked loudly, "We fled all the way here, and we have no farmland, no houses and livestock. How can we survive? Is the Lord still willing to feed us for nothing?" Pierce's mouth curled up slightly. This was the person who was planted by instructor Asdalin in advance among the refugees, and was responsible for singing the same tune with him to brainwash everyone. "Everyone, rest assured. Joining your master's territory will provide you with food and temporary shelter. Once you recover, everyone will find a job to make a living. Whether you are a farmer or a craftsman, you don't have to worry about starving to death. The frontier territories of the northern wastes are filled with fertile land, with herds of cattle and sheep waiting to graze. The strong soldiers of the territory around you will ensure your safety, and you won't be harassed by the marauding orcs." An infected person, helped out of the shed, was led onto the platform. Pierce untied his thin, worn linen shirt, exposing his chest. Everyone looked closer and saw that the once dense plague spots on his skin had now scabbed and shriveled, some even threatening to foul off. This medicine really works. I feel much better. No more vomiting blood, no more feverish drowsiness. More and more civilians from the first batch of patients sent in for treatment emerged and gathered around the platform. Me too. Oh my goodness. The blight spots on my body have scabbed over and fallen off. It's itchy. But there's no more pus or blood coming out. That's right. Join the territory and you'll survive. The Lord will provide food and work. Even wealthy merchants have to pay a huge fortune to obtain the church's divine potions. How can poor people like us even qualify, right? I farm for the nobles back home anyway. Farming is possible everywhere. Saving our lives is the most important thing. As more people echoed the sentiment, the crowd grew increasingly agitated. Pierce quickly waved to the soldiers to maintain order, preventing the agitated civilians from rushing into the sheds at the treatment center to scramble for the potions. A group of soldiers, mounted on a strange metal carriage, marched along the refugee shelter, using a loudspeaker to broadcast propaganda. Lord Harvey is currently accelerating the development of the northern frontier territory and needs a large number of subjects to cultivate the land, herd livestock, and build houses. Those who voluntarily join the territory will not be charged any medicine fees, and will be provided with food, shelter, and wages. Anyone can get a job. Those who don't want to join, no problem. Just pay half a gold pound for medicine, recuperate, and then leave and return home. We won't provide any free food or water. Will there really be food, shelter, and wages? I would. I used to be a tenant farmer for a nobleman, and I don't own any land. Me too. Let me join. I'm a weaver. As Dallin sat in the makeshift office at the refugee shelter, reading the thick stacks of lists that kept coming in, his eyes blazed with a crimson soul fire, and he could read an entire page of densely packed text every few seconds. Once an alchemical life enters an absolutely rational mode, its work efficiency is dozens of times faster than that of an ordinary mortal. Pierce gently pushed open the door and walked in. Teacher, there are currently more than 5,000 refugees gathered in the shelter. After 3 days of treatment and propaganda, about 4,000 people are willing to receive free treatment and then join us, as Dallin nodded. What he was doing now was to quickly classify the information of the new residents collected by the soldiers, and to review their previous jobs and original places of residence. What about the other 1,000 or so people? They have fled here for thousands of miles. Are they willing to return to their hometown that has fallen into chaos? Pierce whispered. Most of them are free farmers who own land, farmland and houses. Some have fled from surrounding towns. Most of them are small merchants and craftsmen. Most of them also have family property and are unwilling to easily abandon the property they have saved in their hometown. As Dallin nodded to show his understanding, it doesn't matter. Let them pay for the medicine, then rest for 2 days and leave on their own. After returning to their hometown, this group of people will also spread the word for us. After all, compared to the church's extremely expensive divine grace potion, those who can insist on rushing to us for treatment only need to pay half a gold pound to save their lives. Some of the refugees secretly found the doctor responsible for distributing vaccines and medicines, and wanted to secretly buy some treatment potions. They also quoted a very high price. What should I do with these people? As Dallin finally raised his HUD from the pile of documents, oh. There are still people among the refugees who want to resell potions? These rats in the gutter. Arrest them all and let me personally interrogate their identities. Chapter 250 Vaccine Business. Those who had sneaked into the infected patients and approached the doctors distributing the medicine, attempting to buy the vaccine and medicine at a higher price, were quickly apprehended by Pierce. The doctors assigned to the refugee shelters to treat patients were mostly refugees from the northern wastelands, feeling a strong sense of belonging to the pioneering territory. Faced with these southerners offering handfuls of gold, silver, and copper coins to buy the medicine, they turned around and reported them without hesitation. Pierce easily apprehended 7 or 8 refugees based on the reports. Judging by their appearance and clothing, they didn't look like ordinary impoverished refugees, but more like itinerant traders who frequently traveled from place to place. No one among these refugees recognizes you, and no one can verify your identity. So, where are you from? The royal capital, Jinhu City? Or another city in St. Valen? As Dallin, wrapped in a black robe, asked in a cold tone. The man shackled to the stake replied in a trembling voice, Sir, spare me. I was simply losing my mind. I don't want to go into the wilderness and do hard labor. Let me go, lies, as Dallin muttered softly, then glanced sideways at Pierce. Pierce immediately understood, taking 2 steps forward and grasping the man's neck with one hand. A soft snap followed. 2 Northern Army soldiers rushed over, dragging the corpse by its legs and leading it out of the camp. On each of the dead man's arms, a dark blue symbol resembling a sun rune was tattooed, the mark of baptism, inscribed only by devout believers of the church. Next, as Dallin walked to another wooden stake where a person was tied, "It's your turn to confess." The man's crotch was soaked, and he cried tremblingly, "I am not a believer of the church. They gave me money to let me blend in with the refugee group and report the situation to the parishes along the way at any time. Woo-woo, they promised that if I was infected, I could go to any nearby church to get a potion." Report what? What does the church want to force these infected civilians to do? As Dallin immediately heard something wrong and asked sternly. The man was so scared that he burst into tears and stammered, "Sir. Woo-woo-woo, I really don't know. They just asked me to follow, and didn't say anything else." He wanted to plead a few more times, but as Dallin turned and walked away, Pierce then grinned and pressed his hand on his neck as well, interrupting his last words. This one-off interrogation quickly consumed the 3 captured criminals. Asterin was never one for mercy, not to mention that he wasn't human to begin with. He showed no mercy to those who sought to sabotage Lord Harvey's plans. When it came to the 4th man's turn, Asterin was somewhat surprised. Even though his hands were bound and hung from a stake, the man continued to struggle. His spirits didn't seem to indicate he'd been hungry from the bumpy ride, nor did he seem to be suffering from any illness or infection. "I'll only ask you each question once. If you don't give a satisfactory answer, you'll end up like the previous 3. The man immediately stopped struggling. Though his face was still filled with fear, he was clearly mentally strong and spoke fluently, pouring out his entire confession. "Sir, I was also arranged into the refugee group, but I am different from them. The priest of the church. The priest made me take the divine grace potion in advance." As Dallin's eyes narrowed, staring at the man, and asked, "What is your name? Where are you from? Who in the church is ordering you?" The man swallowed hard and answered quickly, "My name is Benjamin, and I am a private slave trader in the royal capital Jinhu City. I collect young children for the nobles in the city and certain adults in the church to play with and enjoy." Pierce spat fiercely on the ground when he heard this, and wanted to step forward and twist the guy's neck without waiting for Dallin to speak, but his mentor raised his hand to stop him. "Wait, it's not too late to let him finish his words." He took off the hood of his robe, revealing a creepy metal skull. He approached Benjamin, who was frightened and pale, almost face to face, and asked in a deep voice, "Besides asking you to blend in with the crowd and monitor the people, what else did the church's charlatan order you to do?" Benjamin didn't expect that the true face of this black-robed weirdo was so weird and terrifying. He kicked his legs desperately, trying to escape, and began to babble in fear, "Don't kill me. Don't kill me. The priest asked me and my companions to follow these fleeing people, secretly guiding them to attack the Spellcaster Alliance in the towns along the way, and try our best to provoke hatred and hostility of ordinary people towards spellcasters. Don't kill him. Let him identify all his accomplices one by one from the refugee group." After speaking, as Dallin walked towards the temporary office without looking back, Pierce stepped forward and slapped the slave trader's head hard, knocking the slave trader's head crooked, and blood mixed with broken teeth fell to the ground. As Dallin, "My lord, your suspicion is correct. This catastrophic plague is truly the work of the church and the nobility. Their goal is to incite hatred among the common people against spellcasters and thereby expel the Federation's influence from St. Valen." Harvey sat before the magic brain, watching the message from Dallin on the crystal screen. After a moment's reflection, he responded immediately, "Record the interrogation statements with the image stone and immediately hand them over to the Federation branch in Jackdaw Town. We will not interfere with other matters and will focus on sheltering and treating these infected refugees." After ending the call, he immediately logged back into his forum account and urgently contacted the Federation official, Mr. Spell Shield, Fran McCollin, who was still online. "Kilthuzid, Mr. Spell Shield, may I ask, what is the Federation's current plan to do about the plague outbreak in St. Valen? You should already be aware of the gravity of the situation, right? The plague's refugee crisis has spread to the border areas." Fran McCollin, already in a state of panic, saw Harvey's sudden message and a thought suddenly struck him. He quickly replied, as if grasping at a lifeline, "Flag, Mr. Kilthuzid. I didn't expect you to contact me on your own initiative. The Federation is still arguing over the cause of this matter. Aside from closing the borders to control the spread of the plague, we have no other viable options. Flag, however, we have urgently discussed this with the Alchemical Quest Society and sent an official letter to Grand Duke St. Valen explaining and refuting the rumors. However, the cure for the plague is still under development, so I'm afraid it won't be effective anytime soon. Harvey chuckled. Wasn't Mr. Flag's venting of his troubles a hint to seek help from the Forum? Otherwise, why would they confide in a Forum agent like me about the internal squabbles within their federation? Kilthuzid, I accidentally caught a few spies planted by the church at a refugee shelter on the border. Their interrogation statements have been handed over to the local federation branch. I believe they will be very useful for you to prove your innocence, Kilthuzid. As for the plague potion, I have concocted one that has a significant therapeutic effect on the plague. It has already been distributed in the refugee camps, and the spread of the plague in the border areas should be under control soon. Fran McCollin looked at the message sent by the other party, and he was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He almost jumped up from his chair. This guy has already figured out the formula for the plague potion? And it's already in use. Why is he coming to me now? Is he trying to get a ridiculously high price? He immediately typed a response, asking Harvey to give him half a day to complete internal discussions. Then he stood up and instructed his attendants, "Quick! Tell the members of the High Council and the heads of other departments that I've found a formula to cure the plague." Fran hurried to the conference hall, unable to resist a subtle surge of excitement. If he could use Kilthuzid's plague potion to clear the Union of the accusation that the spellcaster spread the plague, and then have the Union publicly distribute the potion free of charge to the public, resolving this sudden and shrouded disaster, his reputation and status within the Union would undoubtedly soar. The long vacant position of head of the Ministry of Magical Affairs would likely fall to him. Although Mr. Kilthuzid's mind was full of business, he actually did himself a big favor this time. Kilthuzid, recipe? I don't have the authority to sell you the recipe, Mr. Shield. You know, I'm just the Forum's agent in the southern border. But I can make potions in large quantities. I'll give you as much as you want, Shield. Alright, then name your price. You're also aware of the current plague spreading across St. Valen. Most of the innocent civilians affected simply can't afford to buy potions. The Federation will definitely not take advantage of this opportunity to profit from the people's blood. Harvey rolled his eyes and couldn't help but grumble, what a compliment. When you first closed the borders and allowed the plague to spread, you didn't even consider the lives of these civilians. Now, when it comes to the potion purchase business, you keep talking about not wanting to make a fortune. Kilthuzid, as a fellow spellcaster, I certainly won't sit idly by and watch the church and the nobility pin this baseless accusation on all spellcasters. How about this? 1 plague potion for 1 gold pound. I can provide you with 10,000 potions within 3 days at the earliest, and then an equal amount every 3 days thereafter. As for gathering the people to distribute the potion, you'll have to do it yourselves. Fran tore off a piece of white paper and quickly began to calculate. 1 gold pound to save an ordinary life was indeed a fair price. For a massive spellcasting organization like the Union, entrenched in the southern continent, money was the most insignificant transaction equivalent. Of the people currently infected in St. Valen, after approximately 2 weeks of spreading the disease, only about 50,000 survived until the medication was distributed. The expense of this deal to save the Federation's reputation is truly worth it. Magic Shield, deal. Please arrange for the potion to be transported via the Magic Network teleportation array to the Dalius Federation branch closest to St. Valen as soon as possible. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.